The story begins in the United States of America, more precisely in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Central Region, in house number 107. A mysterious young man walked through the office space on December 23, 2021 at 7:50 a.m. He approached his colleague and asked how he was feeling, and he replied that everything was fine. The red-haired guy expressed interest in his colleague's opinion about how long they still have to work here, considering that 3 years have already passed. According to the colleague, 3 years was not a long time, since he had been with the company since its inception and would soon celebrate 8 years of experience. Having said this, the man was overcome with memories of the past, namely about the events that happened 8 years ago. Previously, their main task was to constantly monitor the guy on the ship on the orders of the CIA and the White House. This company has been holding them for 8 hours and 1 minute for 69,457 hours, and there are only 10 minutes left until the end of the working day. The suddenly alarmed red-haired boy looked at his commander and noticed that something was clearly wrong. They were surprised to find that the speed of the tracked ship suddenly increased. An alarm signal flashed on the monitor, and the ship's speed reached 50 kilometers per hour. In horror, one of the workers dropped his coffee and watched the movement of the ship. The experienced worker immediately called his boss and notified him of the problem. On the phone, he shouted that they had a code red. The CIA quickly became aware of the problem as the boss reported immediately. As in the White House, alarmed officials did not know what to do. Sometime later, events unfolded in the South Pacific, namely Lawn Hill, morning 11:30. Soldiers with guns watched the young man, reminding him that he should not violate protocol and should return to a safe place. The man also noted that the White House and the CIA are extremely unhappy with his behavior. Having lit a cigarette with sophistication, the guy ordered the man to tell everyone dissatisfied to go away because he needed to negotiate with his boss. Immediately, the unknown person turned around and told the experienced worker that this was an order. The man clenched his teeth in anger. Gritting his teeth, he held out the phone for the mysterious guy to contact his boss. This guy himself immediately called the president and asked him not to worry, as everything was fine. He added that the president understands that every deal has an expiration date, and after 8 years, he has contributed enough to America's well-being that now he just wants to go home and enjoy a cigarette. The guy emphasized that the president knows all the details of his condition and the medications he is taking, and he is sure that doctors have long noted the progression of his illness. He then talked about the final deal. 16 stolen nuclear warheads would be deactivated in 3 months, and with the condition that he would not be touched during this time, the warheads would sink to the bottom and disappear from society. At this moment, the guy mentioned entities that were supposed to fade into oblivion. These demands were the last, and if the president agrees, everything will be in order. But if it fails, disaster will strike and 16 nuclear warheads will explode. The crazy guy found something exciting in the idea of a nuclear explosion. The conversation continued for several more minutes, and the madman was discussing something with the president. After that, the guy said, as if nothing had happened, that the president agreed, and he offered to celebrate with champagne. But the experienced worker believed that the hero most likely had to go to the underworld. Then the madman realized that the agent seemed to be offended by him. All because the CIA and the best specialists served him for 8 years, and because of this, the agent nicknamed the guy Lucifer. The so-called Lucifer did not like this nickname, and he considered it stupid and understood that he was called that because of the traditions of his country. Still, he liked it better when he was called Yan Luo, or Lord of Hell. The agent agreed with the new nickname and immediately began calling him Yan Luo. The soldiers slowly approached, and the agent announced that Yan Luo had nowhere else to go. Sitting down on a rock, he explained to the agent how seriously he thought that someone like him could be caught, and even the White House understood. But he still did not realize that cancer cells were spreading throughout his brain, and the tumor was growing every second, and if he was still fit, he would be stuffed with drugs. The Lord of Hell began to light another cigarette and carefully counted every second of his time, starting with the number 5. The alarmed agent immediately ordered his soldiers to disperse and be careful, because this treacherous villain certainly has an ace up his sleeve, and this bastard is not so simple. The countdown reached the final number 0, and Yan Luo's last words were that he was heading to the underworld. Meanwhile, in London, a man asked to tell the fund how dangerous this situation is for these bloodsuckers, because billions of dollars in profit is what they are looking for. But suddenly, a targeted shot was fired, and the influential man fell, hitting him right in the head. The sniper was able to identify the man and realized that she had to kill him. In the end, it turned out that the sniper was a girl, and she managed to eliminate the target. The girl had the code name Firefly, and she reported the destruction of the target. A minute later, Firefly began to move away from the scene without betraying her involvement. On the phone, she told someone that this work was not bad, but the shooting speed was not enough. She also asked to take this into account next time, like a fox. And she warned that if she had to perform a similar task again, she should not call, because she was forced to overwork. On the phone, the fox said that there would be no more work, and now everyone needs to go into sleep mode. The mysterious killer wanted to know how long the hibernation would last, and the fox answered forever. This made Firefly very angry, and she wanted to know who gave such an order and intended to call the boss, and it turned out that he died an hour ago, recording a voice message. Anger consumed the lady, and she thought that she was being lied to. The alarmed girl began to shake from the shocking news. Then she suddenly started crying, and the fox said that these were the last words of the boss, and he hoped that they would all go to heaven, and he only had to go to the underworld, and asked Firefly to carry out the order. This was their last conversation, so they forwarded. They will see each other only in the next life. The girl continued to cry, and the conversation ended. Out of desperation, she continued to stare at her phone, hoping that they would call her again. Not knowing what to do, she got out of the car in the middle of the road. She suddenly took the machine gun with her, looking at the passers-by. Imbued with indescribable anger, she began shooting into the air, attracting attention and scaring those around her. Passers-by immediately ran away from the girl, fearing to be shot. Standing silently in the middle of the road, she thought about what it would be like to visit the underworld. Pulling out the knife, Firefly decided to commit a terrible act. Because of her desire to go to the underworld, she used the knife to do a terrible thing. A few more seconds, and the girl should have fallen on the asphalt from the loss of her own life. The phone left in her car indicated that the girl would now remain offline forever. Meanwhile, in South America, events took place on board the plane. The girls, codenamed Hummingbird, said they would no longer work for their boss. In a calm tone, one of the girls replied that she understood everything. Soon after this, Hummingbird decided that she too should look into the underworld. Thinking about this, just a few seconds later, the plane crashed into a rock, causing a terrible tragedy. With sadness and longing, the other girl watched as Hummingbird came out of the network, Blueberry came out of the dough, and Iris went out of the network. Immediately after that, she took out her pistol, gradually loading the cartridges. After loading a full clip, she pressed the gun to her head and cried. Closing her eyes, the lady thought that she also wanted to be in the underworld. Events continue to develop at school, where lessons are going on. Suddenly, the teacher asked Chen Nuo to solve an example on the board. We were transported to December 23, 2000 at 11:45 a.m. to classroom number 6. All the students turned their eyes to the mysterious guy, waiting for him to come to the board and solve the math problem. Approaching the board, the guy looked at the equation and realized that he didn't quite understand it. Closing one eye and smiling, he realized that it was like jumping into the underworld. Realizing the absurdity of the situation, he suddenly realized that he was in his own teenage years. The city continued its daily life as if nothing terrible had happened. Young guys were calmly playing basketball on the street court, while Chen No was thinking about how strange all this was, because the teacher kicked him out of the class and asked him to think about his behavior. Looking around, he realized that he suddenly found himself in a new environment, surrounded by strangers. I also thought that perhaps the Lord considers this a punishment, but in his opinion, perhaps it is still a reward. Suddenly, someone started screaming and asking for help because the first beauty jumped from the roof. The unknown girl actually began to fall from a great height, but Chen Nuo noticed it. A moment later, he was running quickly and wanted to save the innocent lady. Fortunately, he succeeded and the girl fell right on top of him. Her name was Sun KK. Sometime later, he and Chen Nuo stood outside the director's office. The guy from under the forehead looked at the girl and noted that it was good that she fell from the second floor. Otherwise, she would definitely have broken. Suddenly, the door to the director's office swung open. They were met by Principal Sun Sheng Li, who wanted to know if they had been to the school doctor and if they were okay. The seemingly good-natured guy said that everything was fine and he was comfortable here, and he also added that the girl fell on him, so perhaps he could be considered her savior. Sun Sheng Li was intrigued by the girl's behavior, eager to find out why she decided to jump off the roof and how such an idea came to her mind in the first place. Confused and worried, Sun KK explained that she was just enjoying the views and accidentally fell, losing her balance. Trying to convince his father that it was not a jump, Sun KK faced the distrust of Chen Nuo, who could not believe that she was the director's daughter, since her appearance did not indicate this. Addressing the main character, the director expressed gratitude for the help and asked if he needed to let him go from class, and if he was already in the hospital, and he also suggested calling one of the guardians. The guy assured the director that he was fine and that he just needed a rest, and he refused the offer to let him go from classes, but Sun Sheng Li insisted that if he had problems, he could always take a day off. As he reached for the doorknob, a thought occurred to him. The director quickly realized that something else was bothering the hero and asked what he would like to add. It turned out that the guy just asked to lend him 50 yuan, explaining that he had a headache. Later, while looking at his ID card, he saw that his name was now Chen Nuo. He was Chinese, and his birth year was 1982. Entering his home, he noticed that the house had an antique atmosphere. When he opened the door to his apartment, he discovered that there was no one there. On the table, there was only a photo of him and some woman. Quickly starting to rummage through his things, the guy tried to collect as much information as possible. Soon, many different documents lay in front of him. He found out that he was now 18 years old and an ordinary schoolboy. His parents divorced early, and he witnessed tragedy throughout his life. The mother married 6 years ago to a new man, the son of a grandmother, and 3 years ago, due to the gambling of the new husband, the mother found herself in debt, and they both lived as if in prison. A year ago, my grandmother died, and the young guy was left alone. He tried to hold on, but still felt like an outcast at school. The main character immediately realized that in this situation, this was not even that bad, since the guy had almost no social connections, which could have prevented many problems. The guy's attention was drawn to a calendar hanging on the wall. Paying attention to the dates, he discovered that today was the 25th. Having discovered something strange, he started searching on the internet how to get to Seoul in 15 days. Unfortunately, he realized that this might not be enough time. In 15 days, at 12 at night, this girl will face the most terrible event of her life. And Chen No understood that he urgently needed to save her, but he had no money for a ticket, no passport, nothing. He knew that an ordinary guy couldn't get there. Sometime later, evening came. The hero tried to use his abilities on the glass of water in front of him. His eyes sparkled with a bright light, and thus magical abilities began to manifest themselves. Unfortunately, the water did not fill the glass. Sighing sadly, he did not understand at all what the reason was and what he should do. Meanwhile, Sunkeke was quietly listening to music in her house and looking out the window. The song contained the words that love requires courage, and you need to tell everything to your lover. And then she remembered the moment when she fell from the second floor. It turns out that at that moment, the girl was watching Chen No. He was standing very close, and in theory could have saved her. The girl in love tried to get a better look at the guy she liked, leaning on the railing. But her hands slipped and she began to fall. When she remembered this, she was overcome with embarrassment and felt great shame about what had happened. Suddenly, she discovered a note left in the book. The note was from Chen Nuo and was intended specifically for Sun Keke. The next day, the hero was thinking about how he was reborn into a guy with the same name as him and returned to the past. Calling on the phone, he wanted to understand what the real him was doing at that time. Unfortunately, when he called a familiar number, he received an answer that an incorrect phone number had been entered. Soon he came to the place where he lived as a child and began knocking on the door. The door was opened by some unfamiliar guy who wanted to find out who the hero was looking for. Looking at the occupant of the house, the hero could not understand what was happening here and how this was possible. Walking down the street, Chen Nuo thought that the phone number did not work, and the house where he lived was no longer his. Approaching the store, the hero immediately realized that the saleswoman did not seem to have changed and asked her for a pack of cigarettes. His gaze turned to another familiar character. The fat man who humiliated him before also did not change. But only one question arose. Where is the real him in this world? And everything is as before, only he was not there. It is at this moment that Chen Nuo turns to the author, shouting for him to appear, as if deciding that his story can be missed because of his ordinariness. After these words, a giant pencil began to fall from the sky. Almost giving away the main character, he dodged in time. The mysterious pencil had arms that it used to push itself off the ground. Soon the pencil came out from where it had fallen. Having a face, the pencil assured the hero that there was no need to worry because in the future, they would definitely explain the intricacies of his life. The mysterious pencil asked to follow his story. Events developed the next day. Everyone in school was whispering that Chen Nuo wrote a love letter to Sun Kei. The school children said that Chen No is a real role model. He is not even afraid that the director will break his legs. Such gossip greatly embarrassed the girl, and she did not know how to react to them. Approaching her class, her gaze turned to the main character. The lady carefully watched the guy sit and write something. The embarrassed girl approached the guy and asked if he had a free minute. Looking at her as if nothing had happened, the guy asked how important her question was. As it turned out, Sun Kei came because of the confession letter, but unfortunately she could not accept it. These words brought a smile to the hero because he thought that the boy was really not a mistake, having interested the director's daughter. Indignant, the girl thought that her interlocutor was not listening to her and repeated that she did not want to accept the letter, begging her not to make such attempts in the future. This is because she is still a student, and the most important thing for them right now is learning. With interest, the guy immediately asked how many points she received for the entrance exams. Incredulously, the girl replied that she had 196 points. The smart guy immediately noted that then she should probably brush up on the material, because, as far as he remembers, many people do not pass the passing grade. After these words, he immediately stood up from his workplace. Patting the girl on the shoulder, he wished her good luck in her studies. The lady was sadly aware that she felt as if she had just been rejected. The teacher entered the class and announced that he had a small announcement. Next month, on the 10th, there is an Olympics planned to be organized in Yanbian, and if anyone is interested, one can register now, and more information can be found in the announcement at the booth, and registration requires a guardian's signature and money for the trip. It was then that it dawned on the hero that perhaps he should first get to Yanbian, then to the Korean city of Koryi, and only then to Seoul. And this seemed to him the ideal option. Immediately he raised his hand, showing initiative. The guy wanted to know if everyone could sign up, and the teacher immediately asked a dismissive question whether he really wanted to participate in the math Olympiad. A little upset, the guy asked if there were other Olympiads, and then the teacher advised him to look at the stand for himself. Without answering the questions, the teacher began the lesson and asked all students to turn to page 46. Chen Nuo almost fell asleep from boredom in class, and his classmates were discussing something at that time. Remembering his school years, he realized that lessons were really boring. One of his classmates approached the hero and invited him to join them to play slot machines. After thinking a little, the hero agreed, because he had just slept and movement would not hurt. Together with their classmates, they headed to the slot machines. Joyful young guys were all playing slot machines, passionately wanting to win. Since the main character wasn't doing well in the game, he stated that he wasn't interested and didn't want to play anymore. Suddenly, someone came up from behind and called him. It turned out to be an unpleasant guy who called Chen Nuo a scoundrel and demanded to know his name. The impudent man said that they needed to talk and suggested they go outside. It turned out that his classmates were in cahoots with the impudent man. They praised him and said that now they could leave. Many hooligans began to approach the hero. He remained unshakable and wanted to understand what they wanted. The impudent man introduced himself as Xiao Dao, but Chen Nuo preferred to call him simply Dao. Xiao Dao clarified whether the guy really wrote a love letter to Sun Ke. This confused the impudent man, since the boy was trying to start a relationship with his girlfriend. Chen Nuo's imagination. It was strange to see the bully and the school's top beauty dating. With interest, the guy asked if she was really his girlfriend. Then the bully said that she was not his girlfriend at the moment, but she would be soon. While the impudent man wanted to find out what was in store for the hero. In order to hear the answer faster, Xiao Dao began to shout. The smart guy really knew what was going to happen. And he said that in such a deserted place, anything could happen. It really was the right place for it. At this time, a girl was walking along a dark street. It all started with the fact that the mother asked the father to take dinner since he was late at work, and it was already 8 p.m. All alone, Sun Ke gradually approached her father's place of work. Suddenly, she noticed Chen Nuo stealthily picking up a man's bicycle. Surprised, she realized that it was the same classmate. The girl didn't quite understand why he was here. It turned out that the guy was trying to pick up the key to the lock so he could take his bike. Then the girl came up and asked why he was removing locks from other people's bicycles. Turning around, the guy saw the same classmate whom he had saved earlier. A little worried, the hero asked if the girl would believe him if he said that he forgot whose bike it was. She immediately replied that no and turned away, not wanting to listen to the guy anymore. After shouting at her to wait, he tried to ask her a question. At that moment, the girl decided that she needed to act calmly and not show emotions, no matter what he said. Walking a little closer, Chen Nuo said that he thought he should speak to her more gently. He understands that she is the director's daughter and should be exemplary, but asks her to be less hostile. Confused, Sun Ke asked if he wanted too much. Chen Nuo knew that the girl was good, and he understands that she simply does not have enough experience to deal with this situation. By simply going into denial, he knew that this was childish behavior that would change over time. Still, he saved her, even if it was an accident. Sun Kk reminded that it was only the second floor and she was not dead. After thinking, she realized that she could not refute this. At this time, the guy decided to ask the girl if she knew Jiang Shun, also known as Xiao Dao. The girl knew him well firsthand because he had previously worked as a watchman at her school, and his father once drove him away, but the guy returned. At this moment, the guy tried to make the girl happy, assuring her that now she had nothing to worry about, and he was not going to bother her in the near future. Smiling, he explained that the bully promised not to cause him unnecessary problems, threatening him with multiple fractures, because multiple fractures take a long time to heal. Zhang himself, Xiang lay in the hospital with his limbs in plaster casts and cried because he got sick after being admitted to the hospital. Chen Nuo added that gratitude was not required since he did so solely in his own interest, and then he asked if the girl knew about the Yanbian event. Surprised, the lady replied that she had heard and wondered why the guy was interested in this. Watching her, she added that Chen Nuo should not break other people's locks. Unable to bear it, the girl shouted that his bicycle was standing in another place, black, with a rusty basket and only one working horn. Surprised, he looked at the impudent girl and asked where she got such information, considering that they were not even studying in the same group. The girl shouted that she just knew and blushed. Confused, he asked why he needed this information. Chen Nuo then explained that he wanted to sign up for the event, but found out that he did not qualify, and the lady was surprised that he wanted to join the Yanbian group. In fact, he just wanted to admire the snow, and he was sure that the girl, being the director's daughter, knew how to help him. Meanwhile, the lady was musing about how watching the snow sounded mature, and the guy was probably joking. Chen Nuo watched the girl closely and thought that she didn't seem to realize that such actions could hurt a guy. It was dangerous to behave like that. Suddenly, the hero's stomach began to growl. Chen sadly replied that he had no money, and the girl realized that it was difficult for him, but not so much that he could not talk to her father and get help. With a strange feeling of anxiety, the girl knew that it was difficult for him, but he could turn to her father, and he would provide him with the necessary help. The lady met the hero's gaze, adding that she did not want to offend him. Smiling, the guy noted that she seemed to know a lot about him, as if someone was finding out details about him. And the girl, alarmed, screamed that she had just heard rumors. A moment later, Chen Nuo noticed the girl's food container and asked if there was anything tasty in there, and the girl walked away, exclaiming that it was dinner for her father. The lucky hero easily achieved his goal with his charisma and smile. Night had fallen, and he was racing along on his rusty bicycle. On the way, he snacked on chicken without stopping. The long-awaited dinner brought him pleasure. While the director asked his daughter where the second chicken leg was, noticing that something was missing today. Sometime later, the hero returned home, and the light was on in his room late at night. This was because when everyone was asleep, he trained hard to become stronger. He believed that he had to get in shape because he had a long way to go to achieve his goal, and now he needed to work hard on himself. Because of the hero's intense training, even the water in his glass began to fluctuate. Events developed the next day. A confident guy stood near the educational part, thinking that teacher Lee did not teach at the school, but was an employee of the educational department. The hero was sure that the company that sent him would organize this trip. After all, educational institutions now have their own sponsors. Therefore, Chen Nuo is confident that teacher Lee will be able to help him implement his plan. Approaching the teacher, he immediately asked what questions the student had. As it turned out, the guy came because he didn't have time to sign up for a group for a trip to Yanbian, but he heard that there are quotas for some students. These quotas are only given to students who stand out in some way and require a signature and recommendation from the director to receive them. At this moment, the hero conveyed his cherished recommendations. This caused an indescribable shock for the teacher. and he never expected that such a student would have recommendations from the director himself. As it turned out, the envelope contained a bank card. Then the teacher remembered that he still had 3 free places for volunteers, and he asked the hero if he knew what the volunteers do. And they travel with the group, eat and live with them, but must carry out certain assignments. This was no problem at all for the guy, and he easily agreed to go with them. The joyful teacher also asked to prepare his personal data, identification number, and code, but the hero foresaw this and brought all the necessary documents in advance. The list of students for the trip will be announced on the notice board this afternoon, so the teacher asked the student to go on with his business. Looking at the departing hero, the man also thought that this guy was really not simple. Events continued after graduation. Sun-Kei was heading home, thinking about something that was bothering her greatly. In the last test, it turned out that she received only 45 points. The girl scolded herself and swore that next time she would definitely not fail the test. And despite all the difficulties, it was important for her to keep up with the others. However, soon the motivation completely disappeared as she knew that the average score was 60. Meanwhile, the list of students who were going on the trip appeared, and many of the classmates around Lady were happy to see their names on the list. Then Sun-Kei remembered how Chen Nuo said that he dreams of seeing snow. Many classmates approached the tables to see the results. To her surprise, the girl found the name Chen Nuo there and realized that now this guy would really be able to see the snow. Suddenly, she ran somewhere at a rapid speed. With incredible speed, she burst into the director's office, and she shouted to her father that she wanted to go to the Olympics in Yanbian. In response, the father thought that his daughter would not be interested in this and asked why she suddenly decided to change her mind. And it turned out that she just wanted to see snow. Unfortunately, all the places were already taken, but the girl began to beg her father, and she didn't care. She was even ready to go with the school choir. The confused father did not understand what was going on, because his daughter had previously said that she hated singing in the choir and the like. And nevertheless, the girl explained that now she likes the choir. Sometime later, events developed, and on the 3rd of January on the platform of the Jingling railway station. While at the station, Lady looked around to find her lover. Suddenly, one of the women shouted to the volunteers to help the students with their luggage for the train, and Chen Nuo arrived in time. The joyful girl began to greet him and wave her hand to attract attention. Approaching the girl, the hero was about to take her luggage, but another guy came up and decided to do it himself. It turned out that it was the director who decided to go with the students. While on the train, the guy decided to find out how the lady was able to join the trip because he did not see her name in the advertisement, and the embarrassed girl replied that it was none of his business how she ended up here because she just wanted to see the snow. At this time, the director watched the departing train and thought about why this student was so close to his daughter. It's a shame he's not leading this trip. The train began moving and gradually approached its destination. The hero was lying on the bed and decided to read a book. One of the students asked Chen Nuo to bring something to drink and pack his luggage, but he had to be careful with the camera in his bag so as not to accidentally drop it. The hero did not receive a response, and he silently continued to read. As it turned out, it was the teacher who spoke to the guy again. After putting the book away, the hero reminded Mr. Liu that he was here to travel, not to work as a laborer. The irritated man began shouting that the guy was a volunteer, and volunteers should help. Then the hero reminded that he had paid for the excursion, and if the teacher was not satisfied, he could provide a receipt. The man can also talk to the guide and ask him to let Chen Nuo out at the next stop, and then return to the school himself. The angry man admitted that Chen Nuo was indeed a difficult child, and then the guy told Mr. Liu to calm down and offered him cigarettes. Continuing to be angry, the man nevertheless took one cigarette. Taking the cigarette into his mouth, the man was about to light it. However, it turned out that it was not a cigarette at all. Then, the teacher thought that this impudent student had deceived him and now considered him a dirty swindler. Sometime later, the train arrived at Yanbian Station. Sun Kk began to pull out her suitcase and at the same time thought about why she went on this trip because of that idiot. Suddenly, the suitcase was snatched from the girl's hands. It was Chen No who threw the girl a soda and began to carry her suitcase himself. The lady was touched by this, and she carefully watched how they took care of that same idiot. Without ceasing to follow the hero, she remained motionless. In an instant, her mood changed from irritated to elated. Thinking that it was time for her to go too, she instantly rushed to the guy. Sometime later, a scandal broke out in the hotel. The teacher shouted at one of the students, accusing him of leaving the group, although they were supposed to stay here for another 4 days. Oddly enough, it turned out that it was Chen Nuo, and the teacher sternly warned him not to think about it. If something happens, he will be to blame. It was at that moment that the guy took out his phone and turned on the recording from the voice recorder. The recording contained incriminating evidence against the teacher, where Chen Nuo said that he had paid for the tour, and if the teacher was not satisfied, he was ready to provide a receipt and also talk to the guide to be released at the next stop, after which he would return to school on his own. The dumbfounded teacher became even more angry, considering the hero a mocker who was mocking him, and he warned that he should not play with fire, otherwise the guy would think that he can do whatever he wants, and there will be no consequences for him. The teacher arrived in time and continued to shout, claiming that he was not at all afraid, and whether anyone believes it or not, right now he will tell Chen Nuo to be expelled from the group. The angry teacher also shouted at the guy to be more careful, as it would be bad for both him and the guy if the tape fell into someone else's hands. Despite everything, the teacher relented, saying that it was not easy for him to get this job, and he asked the guy to refrain from doing things that could harm him and gave him 200 yuan for fun. In the end, the man was not satisfied with something, and he asked the guy how serious he was, willing to put in the effort to convince the teacher. It was at that moment that the hero sighed heavily, and something interesting happened. With ease, the hero knocked the teacher to the ground, stepping on him with his foot while he begged to let him go. The student explained to the teacher that there was no need to worry as he had come to discuss his decision to leave the group. As for secrecy, the guy believed that this could be dealt with, because there are always more solutions than difficulties. Then the hero set off, expressing hope and wishing good luck to the man. Events unfolded 36 hours later, on the border between South and North Korea. Tired Chen No saw that South Korea should already be beyond this border. It was late night outside. The temperature had dropped to -13 degrees Celsius, and the strong wind was harassing. The unshakable guy was not at all embarrassed by this and carefully monitored the situation. Suddenly, he jumped to the right. This happened due to the spotlights that began to shine where he was before. Soon he rushed to the side, avoiding the spotlight so as not to be detected in the open area. I'm running, he thought, realizing that it was possible to get to the base safely. Looking at the floor, he suddenly found someone in front of him. His surprise knew no bounds, and he raised his head. Thus, Chen Nuo noticed a man in military uniform who was watching him angrily and closely. The alarmed military man shouted that there was an intruder there, and he immediately began reaching for his pistol to ensure his safety. Without giving the soldier a chance, the hero immediately stood up and began to follow his newly invented plan. He hit the soldier with force, not giving him the opportunity to get his gun. The unconscious man, sputtering with saliva, began to fall to the ground. To prevent the military man from making unnecessary sounds, the hero decided to cover his mouth and lay him on the ground. After that, the hero dragged his body through the snow and frozen ground. There were a large number of military personnel at the base. They stood on security towers and monitored the area. One of the soldiers noticed something suspicious and began to look around. The attentive man noticed that it seemed like someone had just walked through the spotlight, but his colleague argued that it was just a bird and there was no need to worry, as there was a patrol below. At this time, the main character quickly made his way through the defensive positions of the military. While going through difficulties, he realized that his body was not so trained and it was still too weak. He also needed to replenish his calories and prepare to pass the minefield, since it was already close. For others, the minefield was full of dangers, but for him, it was an easy line of defense, and the hero had performed many tasks here in his past life and was very familiar with this place. Without hesitation, Chen-nuo continued to make his way through the many mines and noticed that there were only 30 meters left to exit the minefield. While crawling through the snow, an unexpected sound was suddenly heard. Unfortunately, the guy realized that he had lost his balance and stepped on a mine. The experienced hero began to dig up an M2 anti-personnel mine. Its weight is about 2.8 kilograms. The explosion is not dense. The fuse chamber is metal. The rebound height is minimal 2 meters, and the effective destruction range is 10 meters. If he doesn't immediately cover his knee, the shell of the mine will explode, so he needs to be careful. Otherwise, there will be a huge explosion and there will be nothing left of the hero. He first decided to cut a small piece of fabric from the inside of his school uniform to leave the mine under pressure. With deep concern, but without a shadow of hesitation, the hero continued his actions. Despite knowing what it was doing, this initiative remained extremely dangerous. Having secured the fabric to the mine, he prepared to firmly attach the piece so that it would fit securely using a pin. By twisting the fabric and using several pins, he created pressure on the mine. Then he had to take a lead and a pencil. With trembling hands, Chen-nuo began to remove the lead from his school pencil. He said to himself that he needed to remain calm and act carefully. Thus, the stylus had to be in the fuse so that the mine would not go off. Fortunately, the guy managed to insert the lead directly into the detonator, and so far, the mine has not exploded. While on stage, the choir continued performing the same song. Exhausted Sun-Kei thought about how clumsy Chen-nuo was. Peering into the hall, she, unfortunately, could not identify him among the multitude of people. To her surprise, the girl noticed that she had not seen her lover for 2 days. All this happened because that same lover is currently trying to defuse the mine. Having inserted the lead into the detonator, the guy decided that this should be enough. He also replaced the pin with a pencil lead and a pressure pocket made from a piece of school uniform fabric. Using double protection, he believed that God should not play with him. Looking up at the sky, Chen-nuo thought that God had brought him back to this time, and he should not die so early. Fearing a possible detonation, the guy suddenly jumped up and ran to the side. Then he immediately lay down on the ground, protecting himself from the possibility. Looking at the mine, he discovered that it had not worked. Calmly rising from the ground, he moved forward. Thinking that there were probably M2 mines on the southern border as well, he remembered this and quickly continued on his way. Noticing a narrow gorge, the guy decided to follow his plan. Leaping into the ditch to avoid the searchlights, he was safe. Suddenly, several more soldiers appeared, but they were in completely different uniforms. He was relieved to realize that the place was safe for the time being. Suddenly, several more soldiers rushed into the gorge, seeing Chen-nuo sitting there. The soldiers looked at the schoolboy in surprise and began to chase him. The extraordinary guy rushed at one of the military men and pushed him aside. Confused, the soldier began to fall, and Chen-nuo confidently ran past. With a sharp movement of his hand, Chen took out a knife from his pocket and threw it at the second soldier. The knife darted through the air and then hit its target. Thanks to the accuracy of the throw, one of the soldiers was taken out of the battle. Only a few seconds passed, and the knife definitely reached its target. A well-thrown knife neutralized one of the soldiers, and he no longer posed a threat. Realizing that there was only one opponent left, Chen Nuo prepared for his next action. The man invited him to attack. Unable to tolerate this, the guy ordered the man to stop pretending and retreat. A powerful blow to the enemy followed, leaving him completely bewildered. At this time, the hero remained absolutely unperturbed, silently watching as his opponent was destroyed. Experiencing severe pain, the man could not move. He only hummed when he heard the snow rustling under footsteps behind him. Smirking, the last words the military man heard were advice to behave courageously and not to become arrogant. Wearing a military uniform, the hero realized that if he was careful, he could get past the South Korean border guards. As if nothing had happened, the guy in military uniform began to leave the scene. Sometime later, events developed on January 6, 2001 at 15. Chen Nuo bleached his hair and wore a cap as a disguise. The mysterious guy called a taxi, preparing for the next tasks. He told the taxi driver that he needed to get to Apgujeong, one of the regions of South Korea. Sighing heavily, the guy reflected on the fact that in his previous life he was assigned to complete one task. Namely, kill business tycoon Ha Jun-jae, for which a reward of $50 million was offered. Now events have unfolded in Ha Jun's villa Jae. During this mission, Chen Nuo met Li Yingwang for the first time. She was 22 years old. Entering one of the rooms of the estate, the unsuspecting guy drew attention to the girl. His surprise knew no bounds, because he was also 22 years old. The beautiful girl turned to the guy and said that he was already late, considering him a security guard. A shot rang out, and the guards realized their boss was in danger. The hero dragged the girl to him, and she insulted him and demanded to let him go. Seeing the suspicious figures, the guards ordered them to stand. Many people in black surrounded the hero and the girl, approaching from all sides. Chen Nuo did not feel the slightest embarrassment when he opened fire on those who stood in his way. Many guards fell in this battle. The survivors began returning fire. The experienced killer was not afraid of bullets, and he easily dodged them. He then continued to attack enemy targets. Sometime later, events unfolded in a country house in the forest. There, the hero released the girl, who also turned out to be a hired killer. It turned out that Chen Nuo wanted to transfer the girl to a safe place so that no one could detect them. Back then, Li Yingwang was a crazy woman with severe mental paranoia. She invited the hero to do whatever he wanted with her. The girl extended her hand in gratitude. Not getting the reaction she wanted, Li Yingwang attacked. Rising from a prone position, she attacked the hero with her fists. With one precise blow to the neck, the guy quickly neutralized her. Having come to her senses, the girl found herself hanging in the air, completely tied up, and with her mouth closed. Lightly lighting a cigar, the hero asked the girl to shut up. The next day brought new events. Having calmed the girl down, Chen Nuo began to untie her. For his own safety, he pulled out a pistol and asked the mad lady how badly she wanted to die. For her, only one question was important: why she was saved, and she believed that it was connected only with her appearance. A little embarrassed, she dares to ask, "And maybe you just want to sleep with me?" Coming closer, Chen Nuo put a gun to her temple, and in his eyes, she was like a little girl, consumed with anger and hatred, which she hid by becoming reckless, boisterous, and rude. Li Yingwang countered, pointing out his strength and skill, which she saw when he killed several people and kidnapped her, and in her eyes, he was unrivaled. According to the hero, there are few people in the world who can compare with him. In response, the girl bowed and begged him to help her kill a few more people. Her hands were shaking, and she was ready to do anything to take revenge, even if it meant her own death. The tears in her eyes confirmed her thirst for revenge, and she begged him to help. Thus began Li Yingwang's training, which lasted 2 years. the girl mastered shooting and wrestling skills. With the acquired skills, she could hit a flying coin at a distance of several tens of meters. And after 2 years, the girl was still able to achieve her goal. She became a ruthless killer who did not hesitate to kill anyone on her list. The feelings in her heart faded away, leaving only emptiness and melancholy. This happened due to the inability to forgive those people who were involved in the terrible events in her life. In the pouring rain, she held a photograph of her mother, father, and brother, and she missed them very much. Feeling the girl's suffering, Chen Nuo did his best to take care of her, and this is how he learned what happened on January 6, 2001. Events continue when the hero tells her to wake up, seeing someone cry in their sleep for the first time. Confused, the girl does not understand why she was woken up. Then she asks Chen Nuo to sit next to her and watch her sleep, afraid that if she wakes up in the middle of the night, she won't see him nearby and will decide to commit a desperate act. Hearing this, the hero begins to think about the girl's words. She wanted to know if he told her about his past. Worried, Li Yingguang remembered that it was dark, windy, and cold that evening, and her mother scolded her brother for fighting at school, and then they broke in. Unknown people killed her father and took all the assets of the business, and they killed her brother in front of her and her mother, the brother who always took care of her. They then brutally murdered her mother using horrific methods. Then the guy who killed her mother dragged the girl into the house and did terrible things next to the sunflowers that her mother planted. After listening to the story, Chen Nuo wanted to understand why she too was not killed at that moment. It turned out that they wanted to lock her up, perhaps because they thought she was beautiful and they were coming back for her, but she managed to escape by jumping into the river. Then the hero asked what happened next. After escaping, she found a friend of her father who took her in, but then did terrible things to her and handed her over to the killers. The girl didn't want to tell anything more, because from 16 to 22 years old, she lived in hell. Now she was going to live only for the hero, and he allowed her to, and she would unquestioningly carry out his orders, including murder. For a long time, her world was completely dark, and the only light she met was Chen Nuo. Chen noted that there is light in everything, and you should not allow darkness to overcome you. Everyone can shine on their own, even if they are weak, and hope should not depend on the light of others. It is worth learning to shine with your own light. And today, the hero decided to name the girl Firefly. Returning to real-time events, the taxi driver turned to Chen Nuo. The man turned around and said that they had arrived. Getting out of the taxi, the hero headed somewhere. On his way, he saw the same Li Yingguang, who stood carefree and ate lollipop. There was a man standing opposite. Suddenly, he hit her hard. Because of Li Yingguang's unexpected blow, an obscene word came out. Approaching the girl, Chen Nuo took her by the ear and remarked that such ladies should not resort to curses. This angered her even more, and she decided to find out who he was. Then the hero turned to the girl, greeting her like a firefly. The surprised lady continued to look at the stranger, not understanding the meaning of this nickname. Angry, she asked who he was and what he was doing there. Coming closer, he said that he was a man who literally fell from heaven, and he came to help her get rid of the nightmares that haunt her. The girl, not understanding anything, continued to look at him with dissatisfaction. Suddenly, she smiled at him. Her knee showed signs that she was about to strike. And this happened, and at first glance, the defenseless lady began to attack with her legs. Then she screamed across the street, accusing him of being a pervert. Worried, she ran down the street calling the police. Luckily, one of the policemen was nearby. Li Yingguang pointed at the guy and began to tell the policeman what happened. Both, facing the place where the guy stood, were amazed. It was as if he had disappeared, as if he had evaporated. In the place where he stood, he was no longer there. Events unfolded on January 6, 2001, at 18 Heward at the National Intelligence Agency. There was talk of a secret military operation carried out on the border last night, and 2 people sent on the mission had died, and all the evidence was captured in photographs. In the area of the minefield, 300 meters north of the victim, an M2 mine was discovered, which was neutralized using special equipment. Information, photographs, and preliminary analysis files were sent to everyone present, and this incident was indicative of military infiltration of the country. With the enemy in the north already in position to defend Korea, orders were given to locate North Korean agents infiltrating their territory as quickly as possible. Everyone present at the meeting served their country with loyalty and truth. At the same time, north of the border, the Secret Frontier Command was discussing an enemy invasion from the south. This forced the declaration of martial law and searches throughout the territory, and it was necessary to find the enemy who had entered unnoticed in order to prevent the success of his plot. Having said this, the man wanted to know who was patrolling the scene last night. Hearing this, he gave the order to shoot absolutely everyone. At this time, Chen Nuo was on the roof of a house and sneezed. Wiping his nose, he thought that someone was thinking about him now. To strengthen his strength, the hero took out a chocolate bar. He began to eat it, realizing that he had forgotten to buy something to drink, but the taste was pleasant. Hearing the aroma, he realized that chicken soup was being prepared somewhere nearby. To conduct a little reconnaissance, the guy leaned over the edge of the roof to look out the window. There was someone on his knees, and he was being questioned about why he had gotten into a fight at school. It was a mother scolding her son, and at the same time, her daughter stuck her tongue out at him. The girl's laughter caused by what was happening was so contagious that she truly felt happiness. The hero, meanwhile, watched from the window as Lee Ingwang rejoiced at what was happening. Suddenly, there was a loud screeching sound of the car's brakes. Chen Nuo instantly realized that an attack had begun. Many people dressed in black began to approach the building, while the hero followed the events from the roof of the building. Then he realized that the situation had become critical and he needed to take action. The bandits were approaching the building, preparing to attack. Interrupting the current event, a small performance began. The author asks a question about Chen Nuo's past life. Numerous intelligence agencies, including the CIA, were investigating him. Ultimately, all intelligence agencies were wary, since this guy's behavior was completely unpredictable. Despite this, they managed to find out 2 important things, and firstly, Chen Nuo cares about his comrades very much. Secondly, he established strong relationships with his companions. Their bond transcended love, affection, or friendship, and they were each other's only hope for survival. Their relationship was so strong that only Chen Nuo's death could break it. Seeing this, all the partners decided to also go offline. Therefore, to find out how Chen Nuo decided to change the tragic fate of his subordinates, you will have to wait for the next part of the video. Returning to the events involving the school children, someone began knocking on the door of the teacher's office. It was Sun KK, who looked extremely worried. The caring teacher wanted to know the reason for the girl's arrival and her late appearance. The indignant lady was interested in the whereabouts of Chen Nuo, since she had not seen him for 2 whole days. The teacher planned to continue the search later since he had just woken up, but the girl urgently needed to find Chen Nuo, because at this time she sincerely wanted to talk to him. Having said that, it was already late and everyone around had been asleep for a long time. The girl still looked worried and told the teacher that Chen Nuo could have left. At that moment, someone started calling the teacher's phone. The worried teacher was glad in his heart that he was being called. It turned out that it was the director who wanted to say something. Then the girl began to demonstrate, insisting that he, under no circumstances, reveal her presence here to his father. She literally begged, and she asked that her father not find out that she had come. Worried and feeling embarrassed, the girl quickly moved away so that no one would know about her adventures. Closing the door behind him, the teacher began to cry and think that these students were too difficult for him. Returning to the events at the mansion, a group of bandits began to invade the estate. Soon, they decisively burst through the door, armed, and began to quickly move through the house. The bandits entered the room where almost the entire family was, and all its members were amazed at what was happening. The brother began shouting at the attackers, trying to find out who they were. One of the bandits hit the defenseless guy hard and ordered him to leave. Jonghae, Chae Taeyeon, and Chae Gaehoon then entered the house. They watched the frightened family with indifference and lack of pity, while Chenhua watched everything that was happening. The hero immediately realized that this was one of the killers involved in the terrible incident. As for the Lee family, let's start with these three people. Ha Jong-hae and Lee's father run a shipping business together. In 2000, their business became flourish. This year, two brothers, Chae Taeyong and Chae Jaehoon, who were secretly involved in loan sharking, illegal drugs, and the shady business of organ trafficking, took an interest in a shipping company headed by Lee and Ha Jong-hae's father. President Ha joined them, but Father Lee refused to cooperate. Eventually, President Ha joined forces with the brothers and left the Lee family. Due to a strong blow, the brother was wounded and lay unconscious. His mother immediately came to his defense. She could not stand it when her son was beaten. At this time, another attacker approached the girl. She screamed and asked for help, but did not expect that anyone would hear her. Turning his attention to the clock, the hero realized that it was time to act. The arrogant perverts continued to torment the girl, and she, powerless, began to cry. Suddenly, there was a noise, and the bandits immediately turned around to see what had happened. The criminal immediately released the girl and headed to the window. Opening the window, he was going to look out onto the street. Sitting on the roof, the hero was watching him, and the bandit shouted, asking who was there, as he heard some rustling. Looking out the window, the brothers discovered that there was a fire truck nearby, which was extremely unfortunate. The criminals realized that they could no longer stay here, and they urgently needed to leave. They all headed to the cars together, taking the entire family out of the house with them. Luckily, there was an empty house nearby, and Chenhua took advantage of this to activate the fire department alarm. Next time, he would have to time it better, because Lee's father was probably already dead, and the only thing that could be done was to save the widow and orphans. But unfortunately, it will be difficult in any case. Killing everyone at once is easy, but too many corpses will only lead to trouble for the widow and orphans. Therefore, Chenhua decides to change his location. From his memory, he headed to the garage and found Lee's father's car. In a fast car, he started chasing the criminals to save the whole family. Soon the bandits arrived somewhere and stopped. One of the main gangsters discovered that Lee Dong-hyuk was also here. In the past, he always scolded him like a dog and got double the money, reputation, and status. Also took away the woman he loved from Ha Jong-hae and had 2 children with her. The worried man looked out the car window and thought about what was happening. Then one of the brothers turned to him with a smile and asked if he felt calm, and lit a cigarette to relax a little. When they reach their destination, this woman will become Ha Jong-hae's property, and he will be able to do whatever he wants with her. The elderly man lit a cigarette and continued his thoughts. Soon, he laughed and exclaimed that he wanted to enjoy not only his wife, but also Lee Dong-hyuk's daughter, so that even in hell he would be a loser. Events continued to take place in an abandoned factory in Seoul. The mother begged to let her children go for the sake of a past friendship with Lee Dong-hyuk. The woman's words did not convince the man at all, and he stood with a whip near the defenseless prisoners. The woman was literally on her knees and asked to spare her and her family. Unfortunately, Ha Jong-hae did not want to listen to her and raised his whip to strike. Defenseless and innocent children sat on their laps, and their mother covered them with her own body. The ruthless scoundrel hit his mother on the back with a whip, and she turned to him because she wanted to know why he was doing this. They did absolutely nothing to him, and the woman felt sorry for him that his heart was completely rotten. Suddenly, the eldest son appeared, who decisively decided not to waste time and begin to act. The guy screamed, rushing forward, trying to protect his family with his own efforts. Attacking the villain, he began to push him so that he fell to the ground. Unfortunately, the man turned out to be much stronger and easily hit the young man, who began to fall to the floor. The guards started kicking the guy while Lee Ingwang begged them to stop bullying her brother. The crying girl sat in despair, thinking that if this was not a dream, then she really wanted to wake up. Blushing with fear and anger, she literally sobbed in front of the bandits, hoping that they would spare her and her family. At that moment, the innocent lady remembered the stranger who had told her strange things. Smiling, he said a strange phrase, as if he was the one who came down from heaven to help her get rid of her nightmares. Then it dawned on the girl that everything that was happening was a terrible dream that the stranger was talking about. Suddenly, another car pulled up, and there was a loud noise. Under the influence of fear, everyone began to cover their ears, unable to bear the sound of such volume. Lee Ingwan turned her attention to the car that had arrived. It was her father's white car, which previously belonged to him. The question arose in her mind as to who was driving this machine. A mysterious stranger came out of it. Chen Nuo, as if nothing had happened, got out of the car and announced that there were some problems with it. The bandits pointed their weapons at him, but the hero continued to say that the clutch was loose. Problems were felt when accelerating, and there was also something wrong with the steering wheel. Perhaps it needed to be replaced. The guy's story amazed all the criminals and seemed incredible. Or the girl stared at the person who could possibly save her. Smiling, Chen made a light joke, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. Continuing to cry, the girl could hardly believe her eyes, recognizing her savior in him. One of the main bandits exclaimed, wanting to know who this mysterious youth was. The evil red-haired brother ordered his people to kill the impudent people who dared to appear on their territory. A man with a bat was running behind the guy, full of evil intentions. Swinging at the guy, he was going to hit him with a bat with nails, but he stood motionless, as if he was planning something. With incredible dexterity, the main character managed to easily turn around. He easily launched a devastating counterattack that could defeat anyone. The force of the blow made the scoundrel salivate, and he burst into tears of pain. Literally a moment later, the scoundrel lay on the ground, motionless and unable to move. The brothers were apparently unhappy with what had happened and seemed a little agitated. The red-haired man insisted that the guards not stand by, but join him in destroying the scoundrel. Many henchmen rushed to attack the guy, not yet realizing his true strength. Due to the lack of information about Chen Nuo, all the bandits working for the brothers were defeated. Fighting with them, the hero did not experience any difficulties because he was ready to destroy any enemy. Seeing what was happening, the heads of the gangster groups were shocked and could not believe their eyes, because the unknown guy was able to destroy many professional mercenaries, and there was not a single scratch on his body. Then, the brother asked Kyung-hoon to kill the newly arrived guy. The old man also insisted on killing, believing that the man was a professional soldier in the frontline troops, and this young guy was no match for him. At that moment, the man took out a knife and was ready to fight with an unknown enemy. From this development of events, the hero only sighed heavily. He then asked to be reminded that he was the second person to show him his knife, and asked if the man knew what happened to the first person. The man attacking shouted to the young man to stop talking nonsense and quickly run to his goal. With a deft movement, Ken Hong made his first strike, but missed. Chen Nuo's agility was much more developed than that of an elite soldier. The man made a powerful kick, but the agile young man easily dodged. The incredibly powerful blow damaged the car door, as if another car had crashed into it. Then followed a powerful series of attacks, from which the unknown enemy dodged, as if he foresaw where the blow would be directed. Laughing, the hero said that now he would not joke. And he began not only to dodge, but also to carry out his attacks. The man violently wished for death, screaming for him to die as he launched his strongest attack. With one powerful blow, Chen Nuo knocked the weapon out of his opponent's hands. Now he himself began to attack with great speed. Suddenly, the experienced fighter turned pale and experienced incredible pain. It turned out that the mysterious enemy had his ace up his sleeve, a hidden blade. Calling the elite soldier a show-off, the hero watched as his opponent fell to the ground. This made the elderly boss even more angry, and he was contemplating his next move. While quickly running away, Chen Nuo noticed Ha Zhongye trying to escape. Then he took the briefcase in his hands to make an unexpected move in this battle. With full force, the guy threw the briefcase right at the back of the scoundrel trying to escape, thus defeating him without engaging in a real fight because there were bricks in the briefcase. The red-haired guy began to get even more nervous, realizing that the main character was much better prepared than their bandit army. Looking into the eyes of the red-haired scoundrel, the hero told him that he should not just watch what was happening, but should prepare himself because he would be next. The bandit realized that he was left alone on the battlefield. With sadness in his eyes, one of the brothers looked at Li Yingwang, who watched with delight the actions of her savior. Realizing that it was time to act, the man rushed to the girl and ordered her to come here. He didn't care who he was, but it seemed like the hero cared about the little girl, and in exchange for this, the insolent one asked to be released. Chen Nuo addressed the girl directly and asked if she was scared. There was only despair in her eyes, and tears flowed like a river. Smiling and caringly, Chen Nuo asked her not to be afraid. After thinking about his actions, the hero said that he did not want to use this trick since he had not yet practiced it, but there was no choice. After a moment, he made a surprising gesture with his hands. After that, he concentrated all his power and energy on the object. The guy's silhouette was enveloped in a bright blue light, as if he had magic. The attacker continued to threaten the girl, holding her hostage and watching the hero change his appearance. Then he began to scream, wanting to understand what was happening, but he could not move and felt his body being enveloped in something unknown. This gave Chen Nuo the opportunity to get much closer. Having met their eyes, the guy said that this man was the third today who showed him a knife. Having freed the girl from the hands of the insolent man, he received a well-deserved punishment and was shocked by what was happening. He had never seen anything like this before. Anger destroyed the red-haired scoundrel, and he began to fall to the ground. The brave savior was able to help the family and the girl, saving her from further suffering that she had previously experienced. Touching the girl, he asked if she was afraid. Not understanding anything, she only became embarrassed and continued to look at her savior. All this happened because the hero assured her that he could rid her of nightmares. Events unfolded 2 hours later in the house of Li Yingwang. Li Yingwan was sleeping peacefully on her sofa, covered with a jacket. Soon she opened her eyes. Then she slowly got up from the sofa. Looking at her surroundings, she thought that this was her home. Chen Nuo also came into view and explained that she was too scared and lost consciousness. Without hesitation, the guy treated himself to someone else's house, enjoying delicious noodles. Turning to the half-asleep lady, he also asked her to return her jacket. When she lost consciousness, the guy was afraid that she would freeze and covered her, but she clung to her jacket, and he was afraid of waking her, so he left it like that. Chen extended his hand and began to take his jacket, but Li deliberately held it in her hands. Sighing, he smiled and said that these were his clothes. At this moment, the lady felt even more awkward and embarrassed. The guy also said that he had prepared chicken soup, and if she was hungry, she could go eat. Her brother was wounded, but her mother had already given him medicine, and they had already discussed everything while Ingwan was sleeping. She will tell the girl everything, and the hero advised her not to contact the police, since he had completely solved the problem. Stretching out his hand, the caring young man wanted to touch the rescued one. To his surprise, he began stroking her hair. Realizing that it was Chen Nuo, Li Yingwan began to stroke his hand and blushed. She wanted to know why he said he was older when they were about the same age. This answer surprised the hero, but he explained that in such situations, he tries to prevent mental trauma, and he has little time. The girl claimed that she was not afraid now, and she was not afraid. She also wanted to know who he was and what happened this evening, because he said that he came down from heaven. These words made the main character smile. Patting the rescued woman on the head, he asked her not to ask many questions, as her mother would tell her everything. Chen Nuo also said that her mother would be angry for her unconventional methods. Mom is sleeping and will wake up in an hour, but my brother had to be tied up because he was very angry. Pulling the girl's ear, he also asked her to remember to study hard and refrain from using foul language. Not to mention tattoos, because the hero himself got his first tattoo in his youth and later felt regret. And besides, you shouldn't smoke and drink alcohol, but it's important to remember everything that the mysterious guy said. Then, the girl began to insist that she did not use profanity, did not wear tattoos, did not drink alcohol or smoke, and she remembered everything and was ready to follow all the instructions of the mysterious guy. However, she only had one question, the name of the mysterious guy. Having received this question, the guy pointed his finger at his forehead and noticed that modern children ask too many questions. Rising, the savior began to walk away, leaving the girl amazed that he was already leaving. Having collected his things, he was ready to leave her life forever. Having asked the last question, the lady wanted to know who he really was, a man or an angel from heaven. After thinking about this, the guy replied that he did not believe in God, but only believed in his elder brother Guan. Suddenly, the suitcase at the hero's feet began to move. With a flourish, the hero hit him and ordered him to stop moving and be silent. According to the hero, Ha Youngjae was in the suitcase, and it will be useful to him. Saying goodbye, Chen No was already preparing to leave, but the girl stopped him again. Looking straight into his eyes, she asked if she would be able to meet him again. With a grin, the hero asked if she liked fireflies. Rejoicing, the girl shared that she really liked them, because in the summer, her brother took them to catch fireflies together. Showing attention, the guy touched her neck. And again the girl approached, wanting to receive a hug from her savior. Whispering in her ear, the hero asked her not to catch fireflies anymore. Closing her eyes, the girl thought about only one thing, so that her savior would never leave her again. Then she screamed for Chen Nuo not to leave. It turned out that she had been sleeping all this time and screamed when she woke up. Thinking about the mysterious guy again, she realized that he had really left. At that moment, it dawned on her. She remembered the office, which is located not far from her. Having entered it, she immediately sat down at the desk and began to write something down. With the desire to remember everything, she began to write down that it is harmful to start drinking and it is harmful to start smoking. After writing a few lines, she realized that she had forgotten the next words. Fortunately, Li Yingguang still remembered them and continued to write them down. She also noted in her notebook that it was worth believing in elder brother Guan, but she did not understand at all who brother Guan was. After a little thought, she remembered the outfit the hero was wearing. She then wrote down the words depicted on her savior's robe. Having guessed the hieroglyphs, she guessed that it was Chinese. I remembered with pleasure that her brother had a Chinese dictionary in his office. A few minutes later, she was already climbing among the books to find the necessary dictionary. Noticing this, a certain man watched the girl. It turned out that it was the same brother. Meanwhile, she found the word Jiangning in the dictionary, the name of the place, the location of the old mansion in Jinling City. Feeling fear and horror, the brother tried to shout to the girl, but he had a gag in his mouth and no one heard him. Sometime later, events unfolded in Ha Jonghae's secret residence in Seoul. Putting on gloves, the guy slowly began to open the same suitcase. Faced with fear, the man cried and looked at his captor in horror. Continuing to cry, he sought to find out who this guy was. Without giving an answer, the kidnapper began to remove it from the suitcase. He then dragged it across the floor like trash. Having reached a certain place, the hero, for some reason, stopped. Moving the cabinet, he went to the safe. With the desire to reach an agreement, Chen No asked the elderly man to open the cash. The naive man thought that the guy would let him go, but he only said that he would allow him to die with dignity. The scoundrel wanted to know the details of what it means to die with dignity. The fact is that Ha Jonghae had the opportunity to choose any clothes from the closet, considering them decent, put them on, and then die. The man continued to cry, desperately trying to turn his head. He begged to be released, promised to pay any amount, offered to give all his money in gold bars if only the hero would not harm him. Pointing to the safe, the persistent guy demanded to open it. The crying and pitiful old man begged to be released, claiming that the safe contained a ledger in which everything was written down. This turned out to be true, and the book was lying next to a pile of money and gold bars. However, the guy was not interested in his machinations. All he needed was money for food. Suddenly, the kidnapper noticed a photograph of the victim. Taking the man by the hair, he tried to find out whether this boat was his property. And this turned out to be true. Her maximum speed reached 30 knots. Smiling, the hero offered one more condition since he wanted this boat, and with despair, the man shouted that he would let him go in exchange for the boat. He was ready to exchange his life for the ship. With joy and delight, the guy agreed, asking where the boat was. Sometime later, the hero sailed across the endless expanses of the sea on his brand new boat. Feeling a sense of satisfaction, he sailed on the boat he had just stolen and sang songs. 2 hours ago, interesting events also took place, and a man shouted that the kidnapper had confused him with someone, and he didn't know him. As it turned out, this was not a mistake. His friend's daughter, Li Yingji, took refuge with them when she was running away from a bandit, but who could have foreseen that he would want to harm her? The bald man could not understand what the hero was talking about, because in this reality, this did not happen. He said that the Lord of Hell would explain everything when they went down, and the hero pushed the barrel. That barrel took the lives of 2 scoundrels who were trying to harm the Li family. Admiring what was happening, the hero only watched the process. Smiling, he also realized that he had almost forgotten that he was Yan Luo, the Lord of Hell. Of course, he should be more careful in his tricks to save them, and the guy spent a lot of effort, and now he is suffering the consequences. While the last event was taking place in the school auditorium, the teacher called the attention of the leading teachers of Jiangning 8th Middle School, and all students were required to attend. All the students watched the performance with pleasure, except Sun KK, who was sitting with a sad expression on her face. She constantly thought that Chen Nuo had not appeared for 4 days, and she had not seen him. Meanwhile, the teacher was worried about possible punishments if any of the students were absent. This worried him, and he became obsessed with the consequences of the whole situation and the money he had previously received. Anger took over him, and this time he wanted to kill Chen Nuo. Suddenly, a man approached the teacher. It was Director Fang, the team leader, and he asked Luan where the student named Chen Nuo was, because he was told that he would come in half an hour, but he was not there. Then the teacher said that the guy went to play at a nearby internet cafe, since he knew that boys his age loved computer games. The man hoped that was so. There was still half an hour before the start of the event, and he asked teachers or students to help find him because he believed that nothing had happened to him. As for the teacher himself, he had to go along with him when the time came, and the director wanted to see what to do with the incompetent teacher. Pretending to smile, the man tried to explain to the director that the student was not lost, and he was sure of it. As he left, the alarmed teacher wished the director a good trip. Infuriated the teacher even more, and he thought that the director of the Education Bureau had sent him as just an assistant, and everyone was flattering him and calling him director. Taking all his will into his fist, the man shouted out where this Chenhua was. Half an hour later, the students gathered with the teacher to find out the circumstances. Sun KK insisted that the classmate was lost and the police should be called because he was nowhere to be found and they could not find him. At the same time, the director realized that if they called the police, he would be fired as the team leader, with no one to replace him, and his future would be derailed. The alarmed girl continued to press the man and shouted to the teacher, asking why he was hesitating, because he should hurry up and call the police, because something might happen to a classmate. My nerves were noticeably tense as the man asked to continue the search, believing that they might discover something that might have been previously missed. Then the director turned to Liu An, since the guy lived with the missing student, and wanted to know if the hero had ever mentioned that he had friends or relatives in the area. Unfortunately, Liu An did not remember this, and so the man decided to find out where the missing disciple's luggage was, assuming that it must have been in his room. In this case, the director decided to go in search of the room. Perhaps something like a contact address could be found in the suitcase. Everyone headed to the students' room together. Each of them was noticeably alarmed and expected to see a miracle. With trembling hands, the teacher tried to open the door to the room. And the arrogant man was in a hurry because he wanted to quickly see what was in the room. Closing his eyes, the worried teacher began to sweat profusely due to fear. The door gradually began to open, and a bright light was visible behind it. The teacher was completely amazed when he saw what appeared before his eyes. Someone was slowly leaving his room. Not knowing what to say, the teacher simply stood there with his mouth open and watched intently. And then he fell into tears, because that same scoundrel had finally returned. Sun KK, seeing what was happening, even closed her eyes, while the director simply watched in surprise. It was really the main character who was dressed in just one towel. With relief, the men began to deal with this unlucky student. The unsuspecting hero revealed that he actually went to an internet cafe to play a little game. Having heard such an answer, the director was not satisfied with this, and he believed that this was not discipline and disorganization, but nonsense, and one should at least be much more organized. The angry man shouted that the teachers had failed to teach him anything, and what kind of student was he? And when they returned, he would be punished, write a book review, and the student should seriously think about his behavior. Suddenly, the hero turned to look at the teacher standing behind him. He instantly became alarmed in response, and suddenly everything became clear. Timidly starting to talk to the director, the teacher explained that their short trip was almost over, and the event would begin any minute. Having calmed down a little, the director explained that, fortunately for the teacher, he already had plenty to do today. After the man, the teacher shouted to him to be sure, because he would definitely take up the education of this naughty student. Immediately after closing the door, Chenhua expressed confidence that he and Liu would most likely get along with each other. The teacher was beside himself with rage, shouting that this time he taught a lesson for the school, and it would be remembered within the walls of the educational institution. In a gesture of reconciliation, the hero removed the video with compromising material on that man. Smiling, the hero asked the man if he wanted peace, claiming that he was a man of his word and could be trusted, and yet the teacher still considered his student an imp. Evening came and events unfolded inside the hotel. Approaching the door of room 502, the hero began to knock. The door was opened by a plump girl who asked what he needed, and he was interested in Sunkei's whereabouts. The roommate happily reported that the girl was now taking a shower. The hero looked into the room, and the classmate did not object. Indeed, Sunkei was there, taking a shower. The hero asked the neighbor to say that he would be on the roof and would wait for her. Having risen to the top of the floor, he really expected a girl. The joyful lady opened the door to the roof and began to approach her long-awaited lover. Turning around, the guy was also glad that the girl had come. He invited her to show how special the snow they had been wanting to see for so long really was. With admiration, the unsuspecting girl watched as many snowflakes fell onto the roof. At that moment, the hero asked her to come closer. He then offered her a bottle of soda, but the lady replied that it was too late to drink anything sweet, and she would gain weight. The smart guy noted that maybe it wasn't so bad. While drinking soda on a rooftop with an attractive guy, she felt embarrassed and enjoyed the sweet taste of the drink. The guy decided to tell her that he was in a great mood today, because maybe he achieved what he always wanted. Smiling, the girl asked if this desire was connected with the fact that they were looking at the snow together. He had previously heard people say that life is full of regrets, but in fact, life is beautiful, although difficult. And then he exclaimed that if there is a gap between the living and inanimate world, then it is only a matter of time. Continuing the conversation, he added that they were all hostages of life, and he himself could take care of himself. Turning to the girl, he smiled mysteriously. Then I decided to ask her just one question. Confused, Lady replied that she was ready to answer it. However, she was simultaneously thinking about whether the guy was going to offer her something unusual, and at most she could let him hold her hand, but she couldn't kiss, and she wanted to kiss, but she also thought that she couldn't risk it. In the end, it turned out that he was asking for help in writing a book review. It was clear that the girl was disappointed, as she was expecting a completely different question. Sometime later, events developed at school. It's in the office director. Jinling area today due to strong cold winds from the south, and all citizens were urged to stay warm and take safety precautions. Listening to this, the director reflected on the fact that he had only returned yesterday and hoped that everyone would take the warning seriously. In addition, he sought to understand what happened to Sun KK and her classmate Chen No. Events unfolded a day ago at the Jinling railway station. The hero helped her stand when she almost fell. The looks they exchanged made it seem like they were about to kiss. The director noticed this and started coughing to get their attention. Sun KK was surprised, not expecting to see her father, since he had previously said that he would not come. Reflecting on the situation, he sought to understand whether his daughter could fall in love so early. Passing by one of the offices, the director decided to do something. Entering the office, he stopped in front of the class. The students wondered if one of their classmates had broken the rules, or if they had to announce something important, perhaps even bad news. Chenhua opened his eyes and noticed that it suddenly became quiet, as if the atmosphere in the classroom had changed. It turned out that the director was standing in front of them, and the hero was actually feigning sleep during class. The man wanted to tell the students that Teacher Wu was injured due to the snowfall, and he will be teaching instead for a while. The principal prepared a test to evaluate the students' level and hoped that everyone would do well. He intended to leave those who couldn't handle it after school to clear the snow on the playground. At that time, the man closely followed the hero, looking only at him. At this time, the guy felt like a target. After class, he was the only one left clearing the snow, and he thought that the man's intuition seemed to be correct, as if he had somehow offended the man. Suddenly, Sun KK screamed, Chen Nuo's name and began waving her hand to attract his attention. Turning, he looked at the girl, wanting to know why she was here. Holding out a thermos of warm tea, she offered him a drink, announcing that she had come to help clear the snow. All this time, the director watched his daughter and her lover through the window, believing that the guy next to her did not deserve her. On the second day, the sinister man also sent the hero to clear the snow after school, and despite successfully passing the test, the father decided that the guy had cheated from his classmates. On the third day, Chen Nuo stayed behind to shovel snow because he didn't complete his homework despite not having a test. On the fourth day, the guy was also left to clear snow, despite the absence of a test and successfully completed homework, and the director asked in what year the 15th National Congress was held. And the hero replied that from September 12th to September 18th, 1997. And then the man clarified how many people participated, and the guy didn't hesitate to answer 2074, and the impudent guy asked for their names. On the fifth day, even the teacher showed up for work, but the director could not leave Chen Nuo alone. Sighing heavily, the hero immediately realized his fate. With a smile, he stood up from his workplace, a broom in his hands. Not understanding, the man answered what he was doing with the broom, but the guy thought about it in advance since he was going to remove the snow. The director clearly looked worried and asked the guy to postpone snow removal today. This was not required today, and he needed to go into his office. The events unfolded in the director's office. There was a policeman standing there asking the guy if his name was really Chen Nuo. As it turned out, this man came from Longtan prison. Chen became visibly alarmed and wanted to know if something had happened. The fact is that the hero's mother, named Oh Shuhua, is undergoing rehabilitation in their prison, and because of her good work, she was allowed to visit relatives last year. Also, the policeman did not understand why the guy never visited her. Listening to all this, he realized that this happened before his revival, and he did not know about it. So the mother asked the policeman to talk to her son because she missed him very much. And the concerned policeman wanted to know from the son whether he really did not want to visit his mother. And at the same time, the guy understood that because of the family relationship, he believed, which can sense the reasons why he did not visit her. Hearing the policeman, his words made the director upset. The man thought about what must be very painful in the soul of this child. So he told the officer that Chen Nuo was his disciple, and he should talk to him first. In general, the officer wanted to say that visiting relatives contributes to ideological changes in prisoners, and he hopes that children understand this best. The principal literally came to the defense of his student, saying that he was just a child and should not put too much pressure on him, and after all, he was his teacher, and if something happened, they would definitely call him. Chen Nuo watched everything that was happening with surprise. A little concerned, the officer agreed and said he would not interfere any further. Shortly after this, he began to leave. Then the director closed the door to a confidential conversation. And he said that he read Chen Nuo in his school file to understand his family situation, and he learned a lot from Mr. Zheng, and he didn't think it was so difficult. The concerned man believed that the hero is a very smart child, and he takes care of himself, but there is no need to overload him psychologically, and if difficulties arise, he can always talk to the director. Looking at his watch, the man realized that it was already late, and his student was probably hungry. Smiling, he invited Chen Nuo to go to his house and eat together. Events take place in one of the apartments in a big city. Sun Kk sat calmly at home and enjoyed the delicious and juicy corn, when suddenly someone began to open the door and enter. The girl was incredibly happy and exclaimed that her dad had returned. Chen Nuo was with her father. The friendly young man also said hello to his cute classmate. The sight of her classmate shocked the girl, who did not understand, and she fell into a stupor. Soon after, she started running to her room, even leaving the corn on the couch. After closing the door, She could not understand why Chen Nuo came to her home and why she was at such an inopportune moment. Our hero continued to look at the closed door, convinced that his classmate looked very cute. At this time, the man realized his mistake and let the wolf into the house. Then he asked the hero to change his shoes and enter the living room to begin his homework. The door of the room suddenly opened, and Sun KK came out of it, asking her father about the reason for her classmate's visit. The father explained that he had invited him to dinner, and both should make an effort to complete their homework. The jealous man shouted that Chen Nuo would be doing his assignment in the dining room, his daughter would be in the living room, and they were forbidden to talk to each other. Sometime later, the hero began to do his homework. The lady at that time looked at the guy and thought that he was pretending not to be afraid of her father. It turned out that Chen had prepared a note, but he had crushed it to avoid unwanted disclosure. To convey a secret message, he invited Lady and showed her the note. Immediately after that, he threw it, and the bundle of paper landed on the table. The note said that the girl's father was keeping a close eye on Chen Nuo. Then Lady thought that the guy might be waiting for her father's approval. The indignant director sat and read the newspaper, keeping a close eye on the couple. From time to time, the thought occurred to him that this young man was acting as if he did not exist at all. Thus, they communicated, despite the prohibition of the strict man. In the next message, the hero asked Sun KK, why is her father reading a newspaper from 2 days ago, as if something is wrong? This fact made her daughter laugh. She laughed loudly, trying to hide her laughter with her palm. The man's eyes flashed with rage as he thought that Chen had already called her daughter 32 times, and KK looked at him 57 times, and he realized that he could not stand it any longer. It was at that moment that the father stood up and shouted his daughter's name. The slightly embarrassed daughter turned to her father, expressing her surprise. It turned out that the man was discussing that it was already 7:30, and her mom was slow at work, so he was going to buy food. As he left the apartment, his father thought that he no longer wanted to encounter Chen Nuo and would resolutely not allow him to appear at their home. Sometime later, they all sat down at the table to have dinner. They had duck legs served that were appropriate for their age, as young people can eat a lot to grow up healthy. Sun Keke, you have 2 pieces of duck leg, the hero said, offering her the sauce. To avoid this situation, the father looked sternly at his daughter and became indignant. Seeing this, the lady laughed and invited her father to join them at the table. 3 hours passed, and they were still eating dinner. The attentive father noticed that Chen Nuo had already eaten and suggested that he go home, since it was becoming dangerous on the street, especially late. And smiling, the hero said that he was used to walking at night. Cake for another portion, since he didn't have enough. At that moment, the father flew up from the table and shouted that Chen Nuo had already eaten and was not entitled to any more food. A few seconds later, the angry father kicked the hero out the door. Turning and looking at the closed door, the guy wondered if he should worry about his relationship with his father-in-law. As he walked down the corridor, he noticed a woman walking next to him. She seemed familiar to him, and he immediately attracted her attention. As they passed each other, they said nothing, only locked eyes. Passing by, the guy realized that this woman was very reminiscent of Keiki's mother. Going outside, he felt a sharp cold and looked around carefully. There was a car nearby with cigarette smoke pouring out of it. Smell receptors caught a familiar smell. Instantly, it became clear to him that the smell of cigarettes was the same as that of Keiki's mother. Looking at the window of Director Sun's apartment, the guy realized that he could not ignore what was happening. The next morning brought new events because it was Monday. Regular gambling addicts were in an internet cafe where the main character also sat down. He sat calmly at the computer, smoked a cigarette, and searched for something on the internet. Suddenly, someone hit him on the arm. It was Principal Song, wondering why the guy was skipping classes. It turned out that the man had been looking for him all morning. A few seconds later, the smart guy took out a pack of cigarettes. Smiling, he told the man not to look so serious and offered him a cigarette, but the experienced director was more interested in where the guy learned to talk like that. In any case, he gave advice, and the man listened to him. Sitting down and lighting a cigarette, the guy suggested that the director also smoke so that he would not be bored. These words hurt the father, and he became a little angry, hitting the guy with his elbow. He also said that he should not imitate such youngsters to be cool, because when he grows up, he will look back and realize how ridiculous and naive it is. At that age, the director realized that this was a turbulent period of youth, especially given the difficulties at home. The wise man knew that the guy was temperamental and did not like society, but it was important for him to understand what his plans were for the future. The hero, looking at the director, found himself at a dead end, not knowing what to say. Then the director asked what he was going to do in the future and why, and he didn't want the guy to become a bully and would be deeply upset if he really was going to become one. The main character immediately explained that he is not as problematic as he seems and wants to grow up because he thinks it's good. In fact, he likes peace, freedom, and the opportunity to simply exist without unnecessary problems, the desire to simply eat, drink, and survive. It's also nice to enjoy the warmth of the sun and watch the winter snow while interacting with his daughter from time to time. However, at this moment, the guy explained that, in fact, it was a joke. In addition, he emphasized that the director is a kind person and an excellent teacher, and yet he asked not to disturb him since he is not someone who gets lost on the way. And in fact, the guy just wanted to enjoy his free time, sometimes get bored. And when the director asked how he planned to secure his future, the guy admitted that he did not have many prospects for success and wealth. At this time, Chen Nuo remembered that he had enough tens of thousands of dollars and gold bars to last for a while, and if he went on similar missions again, he could buy dozens of apartments in the center and wait for their value to rise in 20 years. And thus he will become the owner of the property, receiving rent, and will have no need to work. After receiving a silent response, the man handed over a letter of recommendation, and he put a lot of effort into helping the guy find a part-time job and also negotiated work hours and benefits. In the last 2 years, he will have to save money and use it carefully. And this will be enough to go to college, where he can work and study hard to earn the necessary expenses and living expenses. And although this may be a little difficult and tiring, this approach will help him avoid financial difficulties in the future. The guy again emphasized that the director is a real kind person, and people like him will be in demand in society in 20 years. Frustrated, the principal ordered him to talk less and think carefully about his words, and he has classes in the afternoon and must come prepared for them. Sometime later, events unfolded in the dark winter evening. Leaving his apartment, the guy thought about how tired he was, and yet such freedom of idleness brings him satisfaction. In his thoughts, he apologized to the principal as he planned to continue skipping classes, and at some point, he would probably end up in prison. And in any case, this image did not belong to him, and he would have to pretend to be the real Chen Nuo. Events unfolded the next morning near Longton Prison when the guy announced that he had arranged a meeting the evening of the previous day. The prison keeper notified Oh Shuhua that her son came to visit her. The mother quickly went to the window to talk to her son. Tears began to stream down her eyes as she was touched that her baby had decided to visit his mother. Immediately, she began asking questions about why he had previously refused to come and see her, as if he hated her deeply. Smiling, the hero explained that before he did not understand some things well, and it hurt him, but now he feels relieved and does not dislike the woman. It was true, and besides, he brought some chocolate and cookies because prison life is certainly not easy. The joyful mother said that it was not so difficult for her, and everything was fine, and asking her son not to worry about her, She wanted to know how he was doing. Having consoled his mother, the son said that everything was fine with him. The teacher and classmates were taking care of him. The mother expressed her intention to make efforts to be released from prison as soon as possible and asked her sons to wait, assuring that they would definitely make up for the lost time. With mutual agreement, they smiled at each other and exchanged glances. The woman also made her small request as she trusted her son more than anyone else, and she had a daughter who was the hero's half-sister and asked to visit her. The daughter is only 5 years old, and the worried woman insisted that she needed meetings and often had dreams, and if possible, she really wanted to be met. But even if her son did not want, she had already done it. His mother takes the blame for everything. The surprised son learned about the existence of his younger sister. Sighing heavily, he reassured his mother, assuring that he would definitely visit her. Sometime later, events unfolded in the Women's Federation. This is where the younger sister lived, and Chen Nuo planned to buy her some sweets for the children before they went inside. A good-natured woman, watching the guy, noticed that he was very smart. Literally a few minutes later, the hero already had a whole bag of sweets. The woman told him that she had spent several days visiting his sister, who turned out to be charming and attractive, and she enjoyed being in her abode. Due to the special situation of the parents, they did not have enough money to care for the girl, so the Federation allocated them an additional 200 yuan per month. A caring woman transferred this money every day to the foster family's account. While listening to this story, Chen Nuo thought that after his sister Xihua and his father were imprisoned, their daughter was given to his younger uncle to be raised. And listening to the woman's story, he realized that her sister's life was much better than his own after the death of his grandmother. Walking inside the building, they finally reached the place where the younger sister lived. The door opened and a woman looked out and warmly greeted worker Liu. Immediately, she invited the guests inside. Upon entering the room, the guy noticed a woman and a girl sitting in front of the TV watching cartoons. The Federation worker introduced Chen Nuo to Uncle Gu and Aunt Fang as a new member of the family. The man was amazed and couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Chen Nuo. The polite guy apologized for the disturbance and explained that he had come to see his younger sister. Handing over a bag of sweets, he received permission from his parents. He was then asked to sit down, and the man said that he would ask his wife to bring the girl as she loved to play in her room. After a few minutes of waiting, the woman brought in a little girl. The caring foster mother patted the girl on the head and told her that this was her older brother, and she needed to say hello to him. The little sister was very shy and embarrassed to say anything to her brother. Despite her shyness and lack of words, the girl was raised well, and her parents sincerely loved their niece. Even the sweater she was wearing had been purchased recently and was not cheap. Adoptive mother asked Lao Gu take care of Xiao Liu and the others, and she went to the kitchen to prepare lunch. At this time, the hero began to unpack the banana. Immediately after this, the young man politely offered his little sister a banana. At first, the girl did not know how to react correctly and only blushed without ceasing to stare at her brother. Then her gaze switched to the man, thus expressing her desire to ask his permission. A little embarrassed, the man happily explained that her brother had peeled the banana and she should eat it. Then the girl began to eat the banana, which her older brother faithfully gave her. Immediately after the girl ate a banana, her caring brother offered her another tasty treat. With surprise, my little sister began to reach for other goodies. Suddenly, someone decisively took away the delicacy she had just purchased. The boy, who thought it was his dessert, began to take it away. The adoptive father did not care at all. He thought that such behavior was normal for children. They were used to sharing at such moments. In response to what was happening, the main character made his conclusions. In the end, he smiled and noted that children at that age can be very playful and it must be difficult for them to raise two. At this time, the foster mother announced that lunch was ready. The woman and her husband told Chen-nuo to make himself at home and not worry about not offering him chicken legs, knowing that he used to love them. The good-natured couple expressed a desire to see the guy more often when he has free time. Sometime after lunch, interesting events took place near the gate, and the woman felt sorry for the hero's sister, who had lost her parents at a young age. But fortunately, now the child is doing well, and the brother does not need to worry because the Women's Federation monitors the well-being of children and will not allow them to be offended. The guy expressed gratitude to the woman for her help and care, after which she went about her business because she still had many tasks. The woman began to leave, but the hero did not take his eyes off her, thinking about something. He realized that although Liu was enthusiastic, she was still young and inexperienced, and he was worried that she might miss out on many important points. Since a change of clothes was hanging on the balcony and there was no little girl on it, it can be assumed that she had few clothes and had not been updated for a long time. The sweater she was wearing looked clean, but there were a lot of threads protruding at the elbows, and her clothing style was not that of a normal girl, which probably indicated that she was wearing items after their son. In addition, she was very hungry, as there was not a single grain of rice left in her bowl. There was not even the slightest piece of meat on the bone, indicating that on normal days, she hardly eats. The hero realized that an allowance of 200 yuan per month was quite a significant amount. No wonder Shuha was so worried and begged him to come and take a look. Having lit a cigarette, the main character continued his thoughts. Even though he took the guy's life, he still wanted to do what he could for his family. Soon the guy himself came up to the foster parents' door and knocked on it. Instantly opening the door, a man came out and asked what was the matter. It turned out that behind him, a woman was beating a little girl, and she was screaming loudly. The furious mother screamed at the girl, insisting that she stop crying, and covered her mouth. She believed that her youngest daughter would only bring losses, and that she needed to wash the dishes, not hit her. The stepfather began to push the hero and asked why he had come. The mother was amazed to see that girl's brother. Chen-nuo was filled with rage and couldn't believe his eyes. Feeling very angry, he hit the man with full force and started screaming, asking why they were doing this to his sister. The insolent woman ran to the hero and shouted that he had hit her husband and should not touch him. The unperturbed guy simply pushed her away and ordered her to get out of the way. Approaching closer, the man looked at the attacker with great fear, as if anticipating what was about to happen. Without ceremony, the hero decided to do what this man deserved. The worried scoundrel exclaimed and wanted to know what would happen to him. Even the grandmother stood up from her seat to help her son. The elderly woman began to punch the hero in the chest and screamed for him to let her son go. Looking at the impudent old woman, the hero realized that she was not dead yet and asked how she could calmly sit and watch while her daughter-in-law beats her granddaughter because she is just a 5-year-old child. The vile old woman continued to scream and say that her son was imprisoned for sabotage, and now Chen-nuo's invasion brings only problems. Then the guy realized that this old woman was as vile as everyone else in this family. Immediately after this, the unshakable guy headed towards the balcony. To scare the useless father, he hung him upside down from the balcony, and he was hanging from a high floor. Also, the guy warned him not to shout, otherwise he would be released. In addition, he ordered that no one should approach, and if anyone decided to do so, the man would fall. The grandmother could not put up with this and wanted to take some action, but the woman stopped her, begging her not to provoke her. The woman literally begged not to touch her husband, and if he had anything to say, he needed to say it now. Smiling, the hero realized that they could finally have a conversation like a human being. Hearing about the possible conversation, he immediately threw the impudent man to the floor. The elderly grandmother immediately rushed to her useless son, and she started shouting that Chen No was a scoundrel. His father raised him poorly, and his grandmother wanted his car to run over him. The vile woman also screamed that he was breaking the law and she was going to call the police. All this time, the guy was silent, looking intently at the scoundrel. He immediately realized that he could be killed and asked everyone to shut up. After which he asked Chen not to worry and expressed a desire to talk to discuss everything. Without holding back a smile, the guy realized that something interesting could happen now. A little later, he headed towards the kitchen. This was in order to take a huge cleaver. The family began to scream and cry. Everyone was worried. Only the elderly woman asked to kill her, believing that she had already lived enough. Then, the hero put the knife on the table and asked them to calm down, explaining that he was not going to use the knife today. To avoid bloodshed, he asked the worthless family to answer his questions honestly. The insolent mother continued to shout that the guy should not be held responsible, otherwise she promised to put him behind bars. Hearing this, Chen Nuo explained that he is not afraid of such threats, because today he has not harmed anyone. And even if the police come and take him away, at best they will scold him and try to educate him, and after leaving prison, he already knows where he is found. They all live here together, so they won't be able to run far from here, and he boldly declared that he would return with a knife if they did not listen to his demands. Turning to his wife, the man shouted that if she did not want to get rid of them, then she should shut up. With a feeling of remorse, the man began to talk to Chen. He began to communicate with him and asked him what he wanted, telling him about the opportunity to avoid problems and vent his anger. In response, the guy showed no interest in talking with these people, realizing the unpleasantness of the situation, and decided to take his sister with him. And so the woman exclaimed that they were supported by guardianship. It turned out that they received not only 200 yuan a month, but also alimony from their parents. The pair of scoundrels were stranded, not knowing what to say, and their gazes crossed in alarm. The hero said that he did not need their money, and they could keep all the payments. And technically the child would remain under their care, but he would take her with him, where she would live with him. At first, the man began to get nervous and could not utter a word. To loosen him up, Chen Nuo kicked him hard on the knee. The impact was so strong that the man's leg was likely seriously injured. He began to scream in pain and his saliva splashed on the floor. Then, Chen Nuo declared that he was not going to discuss with them further and announced what he intended to do. Of course, they can feel the consequences of disobedience, despite the fact that there is only one hero, and there are 4 of them. Looking arrogantly at the man, Chen asked how old his son was. The alarmed parents replied that he was 7 years old. The woman realized that this question could be important, and screamed for him to go and get his little sister without going to the door, and they would no longer interfere with each other's lives. Smiling, the hero said that he would take her and they would never cross paths again. Passing by the impudent woman, the guy approached his little sister. He leaned over to her and explained that perhaps she still didn't understand that he was her brother, that they had a common mother, and then he asked if she would like to live with him, promising that if he stayed, she will be able to eat everything that he eats and no one will beat her. Without any hesitation, the girl immediately agreed. The guy was sincerely happy about this development of events and asked his little sister to call him brother. With interest, the guy decided to find out more about his sister and asked her name. The little girl's name was Gu Xiaoye, and the first part of her name meant to suffer, which in their country was considered an unlucky name for a child. Chen Nuo is stunned by the realization that there is nothing prosperous in this family, and now it will be called Chen Xiaoye to take his surname. Together with the girl, they bought a lot of clothes and various things, after which they happily walked along the snowy streets of the city. Returning, they came to the hero's house. To his surprise, the guy found that Sun K was waiting for him. K? Upon learning that she called him and he did not answer, Sun KK protested, and yet when he checked his phone, he saw no missed calls, and then the girl noticed a little girl. Picking up his phone, the guy noticed missed calls. Sun KK immediately noticed the girl. Leaning towards her sister, she began to ask where Chen No found her. Smiling, he replied that this was his daughter. Then he told the little one to Chen Xiaoye called him dad. Sun KK lost her balance and fell to the floor, stunned by this unexpected news. Little sister simply watched the reaction of this stranger. The little smart girl asked her brother if she said everything correctly. Then Sun KK understood the whole truth. Angry at what she heard, she expressed her displeasure upon learning that the girl was only his sister. Having stopped joking, Chen No asked why the girl was looking for him after all. At that moment, bewilderment flashed in her eyes, and she asked where he had disappeared all these days. The girl also said that her father was very worried about Chen. The director had cycled past his house several times in recent days to talk about work. When Chen returned last night, he was limping and said he had fallen off his bicycle. Him were bruises by everyone's legs. Looking closely at the girl, Chen wanted to know how long she had been waiting for him. Taking her hand, he repeated his question, given that it was very cold outside, and she admitted that it had not been for very long. Without hesitation, the brave guy invited Sun KK to his home. Embarrassed even more, she was against it and said that it shouldn't be done. At that moment, the girl thought about whether her brother and sister were dating, and it seemed to her that she was superfluous here. After thinking for a while, Chen decided to go to another place because it was already getting dark outside. Together, they arrived at a fast food restaurant, and the guy asked the girl about her father and his interference in other people's affairs. Then she told a little about her father. Previously, when my father was a class teacher, he would sometimes invite a student home for dinner. This student had no close relatives. The student did not study well and often skipped classes and also fought. One day, to protect him, his father hugged him and did not want to let go. However, this student pushed him away. Later, this boy came to their house at night, crying and apologizing for his behavior. He begged his father to leave him alone, but the class teacher was uncomfortable. A few years later, something terrible happened to this boy. It turned out that he was deprived of his life. After this, my father stopped going to work for a while, and my mother often quarreled with him because of this. If Chen Nuo doesn't start attending classes, he will have fewer benefits and an unstable income in the future. From that moment on, everything was clear to the hero. His father saw in him a reflection of that guy and did not want him to repeat his mistakes. Looking at his little sister, the hero wanted to know why she wasn't eating. The caring brother offered her many dishes to choose from. The girl handed him the potatoes and said that he should eat first. The hero gave her the opportunity to eat first because he already had food and he wanted his little sister to be satisfied. The waitress notified that the ice cream that was ordered was ready. Little sister happily watched the huge glass of delicious ice cream. With a spoon, she scooped up small pieces of creamy ice cream. I enjoyed every spoonful of delicious ice cream. Her eyes sparkled with happiness, and she was truly happy. Realizing that she was not the only one who should be happy, my little sister handed a spoon of ice cream to her brother. She cried, asking not to give it back to her, promising that she would obey and fulfill her duties. Chen Nuo reminded her that they would live together, and she would no longer have to return to the terrible place. The tear-stained little sister promised to be obedient. Sun KK smiled and couldn't believe that it was his sister, since he was so nice to her, unlike their relationship. Their relationship was not easy, and a few words were clearly not enough. The guy suggested that she go home for dinner and tell the director that she was with him so that he could start cleaning the playground again. Mom and Dad quarreled with the girl, but the hero believed that this was normal for them. Her father never argued with her before, and she couldn't understand what was going on lately, and her mother was always busy at work. But now, every time the girl returns home, she notices that her mother constantly criticizes her father. Chen-nuo turned his gaze to Sun-kei. Kei asked her not to interfere in the affairs of adults. In her opinion, it was too old-fashioned, and today her father gave her 50 yuan and asked her to go play with her classmates so as not to stay at home, and he had told her the same thing before. Suddenly, the guy extended his hand. He suggested dividing the money equally, since her father gave her 50 yuan. The reaction was immediate, and the guy deservedly received a blow to the hand. Sun KK stuck out her tongue and said that he shouldn't even dream about it. Sometime later, they all ended up together at the girl's house. The joyful classmate thanked her for seeing her off and was getting ready to go home. Suddenly, she spread her arms, waiting for something. The hero was amazed. He only managed to take the girl home, and she was already preparing to hug him. However, in fact, at that moment, her desire concerned her little sister. This was because the little sister was incredibly sweet, and the girl asked her to tell her brother that she was planning to spend the night at her sister's house. Despite this, the little sister still decided to stay with her brother, and together, they headed home. Suddenly, an unknown car began to approach. In the car was the mother of a classmate, who was in the company of a smoking man. Restless, the hero continued to monitor what would happen next. Events unfolded the next morning when the little sister called her brother for breakfast. Carrying Chen Xiaoye happily prepared breakfast for her brother. This was truly amazing because the girl was only 5 years old, but she already knew how to cook. Such skills are really not typical for children of her age, but the girl looked more mature than her peers. In addition, she knew how to cook truly delicious noodles. Little sister also reminded her brother to hurry up with the food or he would be late for school, but she expressed concern about who would take care of her if Chen-nuo went to school. Suddenly, something upset the little girl. She announced that she could take care of herself so that her brother would not get tired, otherwise he might start to hate her and reject her in the future. The caring brother asked her not to worry, claiming that he would never hate her. The little sister was still worried about her fate and was afraid that her new brother might change his attitude towards her. In response, the girl was happy and went to get her brother's coat, and the hero gave up and went to school. Events continued to develop after school. Approaching the bicycle rack, the hero saw something terrible. His bike was not where it was usually parked. Approaching the guard, he was going to tell him that his bicycle had been stolen. However, the bald man seemed completely indifferent to what he was told. At that moment, the guy realized that he would have to find his bike on his own. It took a long time to find the bike, but fortunately, it was found. Having come up with a cunning plan, he hid and tied the bicycle to one of the posts. While he watched who was approaching his bike, several guys walked up to the bike and examined how tightly it was tied to the post. One of them tried to keep his attention so that the owner did not appear, while the other began to break the chain in order to steal the bicycle. Chen-nuo witnessed his bicycle being stolen by several guys who rode off on it. The reaction came instantly, and it became clear to him that he needed to act. Events took place on Tangzi Street. The criminals began to drive the bike somewhere, passing it through the gate. This was a famous street where bicycles often disappeared. The thieves took the bike to a bald man who had a variety of different bikes and parts in the parking lot. Then, the bald man turned his attention to the new product that was provided to him. The brazen criminals told the bald man that the bike was completely new, and you could even smell the fresh smell of oil that had not had time to dissipate. The buyer of the bike inquired where it was found, but the man told him not to worry, saying it was far from their area. An enterprising bald criminal decided to buy a bicycle at the market price. With the desire to get more, The man began to insist that the bike was brand new and he needed to add some money. Not agreeing to this, the bald man asked to stop the lies and handed over several bills. Suddenly, Chen Nuo began knocking on the gate to attract the criminals' attention. A bald man with a cigarette in his mouth shouted, asking why this guy was knocking and what he had forgotten there. Coming closer, the hero told him that he wanted to ask a couple of questions, but the unfriendly bald man ordered him to leave. Taking a deep breath, he realized that he needed to use his strength. From his pocket, he took out a huge metal chain. Opening the gate, he began to approach the criminals. The thieves, not suspecting anything, continued their business, while the guy approached, ready to take revenge. The boss quickly approached him and asked what he was doing here. He repeated that he wanted to ask him a couple of questions. The question was simple: where was their safe? The bald man's name was Wu Delay, and many years ago, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison for fighting and causing bodily harm, and he was released for good behavior 6 months early. After serving his sentence, Wu Dale successfully met an influential man who helped him expand his trade in used cars and sell stolen ones. As a result, he stopped being kind and noble, turning into a ruthless man, ready to do anything for the sake of his business. While preparing to attack, the bald man fell into a trap. His leg became entangled in the chain held by Chen Nuo. With a deft movement of his hand, Chen Nuo began to pull the criminal. Wu Dale screamed in pain, begging him to let him go, foreseeing that his leg might be broken. Whining in pain, he found himself on the ground. In response to Chen Nuo's threats, Wu Dale pointed out that all the money was kept in a locker. Smiling, Chen Nuo followed the criminal's instructions. Soon, he had all the money in his locker in his hands. Satisfied, Chen Nuo began to leave, taking the stolen money with him. Wu Dale called someone, warning that he was being robbed and the other person needed to return, while Chen Nuo was already far away, disappearing from the criminal's sight. Joyful, he approached the merchant and ordered fried meat dumplings and dumplings in broth. Having unwrapped the bag of money, he estimated the amount that was there. There were approximately 40,000 or 60,000 in the bag, and it looked like the trip had not been in vain. To replenish his strength, the guy decided to have a snack. Suddenly, he noticed a car next to him. The men ran out of the car and headed towards the gate of the bald criminal. The guy immediately noticed this and asked to pack 8 donuts to take with him. Many mercenaries approached their boss, inquiring about his condition. Wu Dale ordered to look for the guy who attacked him, intending to tear him to pieces. While he was thinking about the guy stealing 60,000, Wu Dale made that money in 2 days from motorcycle deals. The mercenaries began to interrogate the boss about the appearance of the attacker, and he was able to describe him as a stupid young guy with an ordinary appearance. Based on the description, one of the bandits immediately found the right guy. He pointed at Chen Nuo, who was heading towards them. The angry bald man wanted to know why the guy who beat him came back. Smiling, Chen looked into his eyes and said that he had no intention of leaving. He was just going out to eat, and his bike was still there. Surprise Wu, the distance knew no bounds, and he began to shake with fear. He then shouted to his mercenaries to do as they wish with Chen Nuo and kill him. He also ordered them to take his money and lock the gate. Chen Nuo's reaction only made the strong guy smile. The gate was closed behind him, and he seemed to be trapped. There were many scoundrels around him, ready to do anything to him. One of them was the first to attack, taking a wrench and pointing it towards the attack. With incredible ease, Chen deflected his attack and injured the attacker's arm. Wu Dale was very worried about his subordinates and continued to watch the fight. His excitement reached its limit, and he did not know what to do in this situation. Taking a wrench, Chen Nuo went to restore justice. After 10 seconds, all the opponents dropped their hands without inflicting a single scratch on him. And this guy is too good to fight with, the bald scoundrel thought. Continuing to cry, the villain insisted that the hero was strong and apologized for the misunderstanding. Then Chen Nuo explained that he understood that Wu Dalei would not just settle the situation, and the guy offered the villain time to gather his people, while he himself remained in place. The villain began to scream, begging for mercy and admitting his guilt. The man repented and claimed that he could escape, but Chen Nuo would still find him, and then the villain would surrender, asking if he would be released, considering that he had already lost everything. At that moment, the hero had an idea and said that he was tired of riding a bicycle. By asking Wu, continuing with something more interesting, Chen Nuo received the assurance that he would be offered a worthy alternative with better conditions. Immediately after this, he pointed to another type of transport, which had been improved and repainted last week. It turned out to be a Yamaha motorcycle, personally improved by the bandit, with an added jet exhaust pipe. Now being good-natured, Wu Dalei asked if the hero was happy. All this moment, the guy stood silently. After analyzing the situation, he added that he did not have a helmet. A joyful bald man shouted that the helmet was there, everything was there. The helmet was made of carbon fiber and had anti-fog glass. It turned out that he had no intention of selling the stolen motorcycle, so he decided to keep it for himself. Wu Dalei had never ridden it, so he handed the guy a helmet and a motorcycle, wishing him good luck on his trips. At that moment, it seemed quite reasonable to forgive him. But the hero has his own drawback. He hates bald people. After all, why pretend to be a ruthless bald man? And so the hero asked how he behaves when he sees children on the street. The man, continuing to cry, said that his hair naturally fell out and he did not shave. Sometime later, the hero was racing along the road on his new motorcycle. Suddenly, he noticed Sun Kehei walking along the road. To get her attention, he braked sharply. The motorcycle stopped right next to the girl. Annoyed, the girl began to scream that she had already warned that this was the entrance to the school and that she was going to scream. Taking off his helmet, Chen Nuo replied that she could scream. The surprised lady wanted to know where her classmate got this motorcycle from, but the hero asked her to put on a helmet and said that he was going to let her down while her father finished work. The girl was not particularly enthusiastic about this idea, since it was a very cold day, and it was also cold for her to ride. However, the resourceful guy immediately drew attention to the beautiful brooch that adorned Key's jacket. The lady got angry, assuming that the guy was not looking at the brooch. Then the guy asked where she got the brooch. It turned out that her mother's friend gave it to her 2 days ago after dinner, and the man at the table gave her this expensive thing. From its appearance, Chen easily determined that the brooch was expensive. The girl thought that this pin was not worth a lot of money, but her mother also agreed to accept the gift. But neither she nor her mother knew that it was Van Cleef & Arpels, a French jewelry company, and considering that the average salary of an ordinary person is only a couple of hundred yuan, the price of this brooch was 5 figures. Considering that the girl refused to go for a ride, he wanted to offer her something else. Good-naturedly handing her a certain scroll, Chen Nuo wished her a bon appetit. Winking at her, he rode off into the sunset on his brand new motorcycle. Opening the package, the girl discovered a container. There were buns inside, and she blushed because they were covered to keep them warm. Events developed on the other side in Seoul with Li Yingwang. The girl we knew continued to rehearse her speech in front of the mirror, and she had to say a phrase, but she couldn't do it. After several attempts, she finally managed to say hello to everyone. My name is Li Yingwang, and I'm very glad to be here. Her older brother overheard her rehearsal. Concerned, the brother wanted to find out from his mother whether his sister really wanted to go abroad to study in Jiangning. But it was her wish. For the sake of the family's well-being, she had to find herself a boyfriend. Meanwhile, Sun Kei headed to the director's office. Opening the door, she found her father busy with something diligent. The loving daughter kindly offered food to her father. He gratefully accepted the offering from his daughter. In recent days, his busy schedule was fully determined by the development of the schedule for the new semester, in connection with which a request was made to treat him to dinner every day. The kind young lady insisted that her father not miss lunch, assuring him that the situation was completely under control and she fully shared his concerns. In addition, she expressed the desire for her father to enjoy dinner comfortably on the sofa, while she, taking his usual place, was going to try herself as the head of the family. While her father enjoyed his meal, she followed with interest his daily worries. Then the idea occurred to her to familiarize herself with the documents laid out on his desk. One of the documents caused her some anxiety, and without thinking, she began to make adjustments to it. As a result of this, Sun-Kei felt a pang of peace. She added the names of Sun-Kei to the list of 6th grade students, Kei and Chen-no. The winter holidays began, and all the classmates went home, thinking about how to best spend their free time. At Sun-Kei's house, Kei events continued to develop. The father shared with Chen-nuo the good news of his son's good results in this semester's exam, and looked forward to his success in the new academic period. At this time, Chen-nuo himself confidently counted on successful results, relying on his ability to successfully cheat. The director remembered an interesting fact. There were rumors that Chen-nuo took his little sister with him, and he was surprised and wondered how he managed to do this, given his young age and the need to attend school. And the guy smiled and explained that he's just skipping class. The man thought that it was not worth discussing such things in the presence of the school principal. Out of curiosity, the director decided to find out, despite Chen-nuo's busy schedule, the child needs to go to kindergarten, and if the guy is serious about taking care of his sister, he should figure out all the details. Dongho recalled his childhood when kindergartens did not exist and everyone was raised on the streets. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Everyone was happy, and the director exclaimed that mom had returned. The caring daughter immediately rushed to open the door for her mother. The woman walked in and immediately handed her purse to her daughter. The friendly man introduced Aunt Yang, and Chen-nuo greeted her. The husband introduced disciple Chen-nuo to his wife, and she also greeted him. The tired woman was about to wash off her makeup and prepare dinner. Events continued at the beginning of the new semester, more precisely on Friday morning. The hero watched the children behind the fence, shouting that they wanted to go to their mother and watch TV. At that moment, it dawned on him what the kindergarten was really like. The little sister began to tremble with fear. Her brother leaned down to her and told her that now she would stay here from Monday to Friday, and on the weekends he would take her home, and she needed to get used to it. The girl was worried, afraid that her brother would not pick her up on weekends, but the hero convinced her otherwise and promised to come right after school. Events continued to unfold at school. Chen-nuo entered his classroom. He noticed that something was happening there. Looking at the sign, he realized that he was in the wrong class. He remembered that in the new semester, there were changes in the composition of the classes, and therefore many new faces appeared. Looking at those present, the guy noticed Sun-Kei and her friend. The girl looked surprised and was amazed that Chen-nuo appeared in this class. Her classmates started laughing at her, and she begged them not to make noise, because class would start soon. Throwing his backpack on the desk, Chen decided to sit not far from his friend. Confused, she asked if he really wanted to sit next to her. At that moment, the principal came in and announced that from now on, he would be the homeroom teacher for the rest of the school. Instantly, the director called for a student named Chen-nuo, who immediately raised his hand. The man ordered him to sit at the back of the class, since this semester the teachers would be watching and taking care of him, so he better not try to avoid it. The whole class burst out laughing, and only the guy tried to explain to the teacher that in fact, everything was not like that. Nevertheless, he still headed to the back of the class and was about to sit at the last desk. His classmate asked him not to come over because he didn't want to get involved in this, but to just continue reading the novel. Another classmate was literally crying because the guy behind him was talking to the most beautiful girl in the class and seemed to be making fun of him. Then Chen Nuo noticed the novel In Search of Peace, and he liked Jin Yong's novels, in particular The White Horse and The Whistle of the West Wind, and the phrase is very good, but I don't like it attracted his attention, making him read this novel. A classmate named Luo Qing was glad that there was a guy sitting next to him who had common interests. Events unfolded after school, when the hero came to kindergarten, and the teacher reminded the younger sister to be careful not to fall. The little girl was glad that her brother came for her. She began to cry with joy, seeing such care for herself. Tears sparkled in her eyes as she threw herself into her older brother's arms, screaming with happiness. The caring brother inquired whether she was bullied in kindergarten. At that moment, the girl said that no one had offended her. She was just scared, and she was afraid that her brother would not wait for her. Smiling, Chen Nuo reassured the girl, explaining that such a thing could not happen. Together they went home so that her brother could feed her. During her bike ride, the girl thought that they were heading to her little sister, and the hero could not understand where she got this information from, but the little sister immediately felt that she liked him, and the guy could not understand how children could do this, quickly resolve such feelings. Gradually moving forward, Sun-kei noticed the main character and immediately began to wave at him. Together with Luo Qing, she stood on the sidewalk, calling out to Chen Nuo. A good-natured classmate lent a bicycle, and the hero was very grateful to him. The guy's surprise knew no bounds when he saw his beautiful younger sister. Offering the girl a chocolate bar, the young man said that he was her brother's friend, and she could call him brother. The brother did not mind the girl taking the chocolate and asked her to eat. A classmate thought Chen Xiaoye is very sweet, and if he had met her earlier, he might have asked his parents to make her his sister. Unfortunately, his father spent half his life making money and did not marry for a long time, and therefore he was born late when his parents were already 40 years old, and now he is already 57. Encouraging the guy, the hero said that even if a son appeared in old age, he still remains a father. It was originally decided that he would invite Xiaoye to dinner tonight, but no one expected that her father would work overtime again, and she learned that the education department inspection was scheduled for next Monday, so they decided to postpone the dinner until another day. And an unexpected change arose in their plans, forcing them to reconsider their plans for the evening. Luo Qing was happy about this news because he was bored at home alone. He suggested going to the gaming room to play together. There are new restaurants in Dongshan, and next to them, there is a fast food establishment. And they could spend time not only having dinner, but also exciting entertainment. And after this good time together, they planned to have lunch at a cozy restaurant. Soon they all headed to the arcade room together, and there was an atmosphere of fun and entertainment that they were looking forward to, which was a pleasant turn of events in their plans for the evening. A joyful classmate was going to play Extreme Speed, and the three of them could play together, and the game became a fun addition to their evening, bringing joy and pleasure. The idea pleased the hero, and he realized that this is how real male friendship manifests itself. A cute girl offered to play basketball with her sister, but before that, the guy decided to visit the toilet, giving them the opportunity to have fun with his sister. While he was heading to the toilet, someone entered the room with slot machines. There were drunken hooligans there, looking to have fun. The main bully just took off his cast and came to celebrate. Suddenly, one of the guys pointed out to his brother that there was a familiar face near the slot machine. It was the same Sun Nikkei, whom the scoundrel had previously molested. The guy thought about it and realized that today was really a great day. Coming out of the toilet, Chen Nuo found some bullies harassing his classmate. The alarmed little sister called her older brother for help. Suddenly, someone came up behind the bully and asked if he had left the hospital. The scoundrel turned around and shouted, "Is the one who is asking blind and not seeing?" Chennuo came over, smiling sweetly and watching the bully. His partner interceded and ordered him to leave, explaining that his brother was talking to his future wife, and he wanted to know how the bully got here in the first place. Luo Qing also decided to stand up for his friend and asked who was running into Chen No. The good-natured comrade told his friend not to worry, and he shouted to the whole crowd who was asking for a fight here. The main bully's partner shouted that he was ready for a fight, and he began to approach his friend to attack him. Luo Qing shouted that his father was Luo Dajin, and he wanted to see who would defeat whom. Dajin's father's name seemed to fall like a heavy stone on the heads of the hooligans. After learning that Luo Qing was Luo Dajin's son, the hooligans began to apologize, claiming that they had misunderstood him and that they were just chatting with his classmate, and they reported that they had accidentally bumped into Luo's boss today and were now leaving. Suddenly, some of the friends started shouting to Brother Hulu, warning him that someone was going to harm Luo Qing. Meanwhile, several men were playing cards, and one of them turned out to be a brother. Puzzled, Brother Hulu asked who dared to touch Qing. The men went to find out the situation, and the brother asked what was the matter. Luo Qing said that the scoundrel told him that he wanted to settle scores with him. Immediately, the guy began to make excuses that he had not said anything like that, and his brother, who was standing behind, turned out to be the criminal who said it. Qing's brother instantly grabbed the scoundrel by the neck, not believing that someone could hurt his brother. With a powerful blow, the good brother quickly neutralized the malicious bully with just one powerful blow.